Love is the central theme of this story about two students sitting in a classroom. While stories throughout history describe love as sweet and alluring, the girl admits she does not understand the feeling at all. Kimichi Shijo is a genius manga artist who writes romance stories despite never experiencing true love, often wondering what it actually is while a boy cooks in the background. A voice calls out to Shijo near the school building. A boy stops Shijo in the hallway and asks her to go out with him. Shijo looks at the boy with a blank expression. Shijo tells the boy she is not interested in those things and walks away, leaving him standing in the hallway. Onlookers whisper about how cold the rejection was, especially since a senior was the one who confessed. Two boys watch her leave and mention her reputation as the witch of the art prep room. Shijo is a talented second-year art student and the daughter of a famous painter, but her aloof nature caused every other member of the art club to quit. She heads toward the art prep room as rumors spread about her performing strange rituals there at night. A man inside the room jokes about the rumors she causes and refers to her as Witch Sama. Shijo complains that it is not her fault because the senior confessed in such a public place, while the man suggests she should try to keep a lower profile. The man notes that the guy who confessed was brave and asks why she doesn't just try dating him, but Shijo immediately says no. Shijo leans against the back of the couch and explains that she could not feel even a single bit of love from that guy. Shijo sits on the couch and reasons that the boy who confessed only wanted her for her fame and looks. The man tells her she has a very unromantic view of things. Shijo asks him who he thinks she is. The man sighs and says he guesses she is right. Shijo is actually Renji Shishijo-sensei, the creator of the famous romance manga titled Love Riddle. The man puts a box of fan mail on the desk while Shijo wonders if she should just tell everyone the truth. The man warns her that doing so would only cause more problems. The man tells her that fans would be devastated to see her working in a room filled with trash. Shijo argues that he said she could do whatever she wanted, but he replies that he didn't mean she should turn the place into a landfill. Noticing the pile of instant noodle bowls, the man tells her she isn't eating properly. He warns her that he won't be there to take care of her if she gets sick. Shijo tells him to look the other way for now, since she can't keep living like this for much longer anyway. The man looks at her with a flat expression. The man asks if she is in another creative slump and suggests she take a hiatus. He tells her she should try to enjoy a normal high school life for once. Shijo tells him not to worry, but the man bluntly points out that she probably doesn't have any friends or a boyfriend. The remark stings and Shijo feels the weight of his words. Looking at her work, Shijo claims that all her love goes into her manga. She says she doesn't care about the real world as long as she can keep drawing. The man tells her not to push too hard and to actually show up to class sometimes. Shijo says she understands and she starts working on her next page. The school bells ring and Shijo realizes it is already noon. She is shocked by how quickly the time went by. She discovers she is out of instant ramen and is too lazy to go buy more. She decides it is fine to just skip eating for now. Shijo laughs and admits to herself that she really might collapse if she continues living this way. With a headache starting, Shijo finds herself unable to think of any new ideas. She looks at her manga and feels that something vital is missing from the story. Shijo sits at her table and pleads for an idea, thinking that manga is the only thing she has left in her life. She hears a knock at the door and realizes someone is entering the room. A boy and a girl enter to drop off homework and comment on the room looking like a witch lives there. Shijo hides behind a board and blames the art teacher for leaving the door unlocked. The girl student finds a copy of the latest volume of Love Riddle on a table. Shijo is surprised to hear the pair talking about her manga. The boy tells the girl that the new chapter was really good. The students discuss the characters and express excitement for what happens next. Shijo listens from her hiding spot and admits to herself that she didn't even know where the plot was going. She observes that while the two seem to have nothing in common at first, they bonded immediately over manga. Shijo categorizes them as a popular girl and a pathetic otaku. She thinks to herself that she can smell the scent of love between them. She realizes the girl hides her hobbies from her classmates, but the boy found out her secret by accident. A secret conversation about manga, and Shijo is moved by the girl's gentle expression toward the boy. She begins to drool as her creative gears start turning. Shijo reflects that although she felt nothing earlier that morning, seeing these two gives her an itch of inspiration. Her eyes light up as she watches the boy speak. Shijo drops to the floor and begins scribbling furiously on sheets of paper. She doesn't understand why the ideas are flowing so quickly. She finishes the draft for the next chapter and feels as though her creative slump was a lie. She decides she needs to thank the students. As the students prepare to leave, the boy stops the girl and starts to say something. Shijo watches them closely from her hiding spot. The boy nervously asks the girl if they can try going out together, leaving Shijo staring in shock from the background. Shijo's heart pounds as she watches the confession unfold. Karasuma waits with a nervous, blushing face for a reply. Shijo is captivated, thinking this is a perfect example of a real confession of love. She cheers the young man on in her mind. Fushimi stands there silently as Shijo eagerly anticipates her response. Fushimi looks down and thanks him for the confession. Fushimi politely rejects him, saying she is sorry. She clarifies that it is not because she hates him. Fushimi explains that she is only interested in people who can draw. Shijo is completely baffled by such a strange reason for rejection. Karasuma is devastated and slumps onto a stool in the room. Karasuma cries over the desk, lamenting that his youth is over. Shijo watches him from her hiding spot while feeling incredibly awkward. Karasuma mutters that it must be fun to know how to draw. Shijo thinks he is being completely unreasonable. He recalls that people in middle school told him his drawings were disgusting. Shijo sits on the floor behind the divider and wonders if she got herself excited for no reason after all. She thinks back to the interaction between the two students and questions if that was really all there was to their connection. Shijo decides she cannot let things end this way and tries to move, but she trips over a bottle. Karasuma is startled by the noise. Shijo falls flat on the floor among the trash and knocks over a bottle of ink. Karasuma looks over and is stunned to see someone sprawled out on the floor of the room. Karasuma gasps in total shock at the sight. Karasuma panics and says he will call a teacher and an ambulance. Shijo reaches out and grabs his arm to stop him. Shijo's stomach growls loudly and she asks Karasuma if he has anything for her to eat. Karasuma realizes that hunger is the reason she fell and remarks that he didn't think this happened in modern Japan. Shijo tells him to stop being impressed and help her. Karasuma rummages through his bag and offers his bento to Shijo. She reaches out for the box and thanks him. Shijo sits down and begins eating the food. She apologizes for her behavior and thanks the young man again. Shijo takes a bite and is visibly surprised by the flavor of the food. Shijo continues eating rapidly while Karasuma tells her he is happy she enjoys the taste. Shijo begins to sob while she eats. Karasuma is startled and asks if she is all right. Shijo wipes her eyes and says it has been a long time since she had such a delicious meal. She thanks him for the world-class bento, but Karasuma insists it is just a normal homemade lunch. Karasuma notes that Shijo is a strange person and she laughs about her reputation among the students. She asks for his name and he introduces himself as Sho Karasuma. Karasuma asks if he can clean the room because the mess makes him uneasy. Shijo gives him permission and apologizes for the trouble. Karasuma thinks that cleaning will help him stay distracted. Karasuma begins picking up trash and organizing the room. Shijo keeps eating and thinks about how the food tastes like a home-cooked meal. Shijo reflects on how she has always been too busy to enjoy food and usually only eats to feel full. She remembers eating meals with her mother in the past and wonders when her last proper meal actually was. Shijo looks down with a reflective expression in her eyes. Karasuma picks up a large stack of papers while Shijo finishes her lunch on the sofa. Karasuma realizes the manga volume he is holding has not been released yet. He notices various drafts and construction papers in the pile. Shijo laughs nervously at his discovery. Karasuma starts to put the pieces together as he looks at the manuscripts. Shijo realizes the secret is out and tells him she has no choice but to admit the truth. Shijo strikes a pose and declares she is actually the beautiful high school manga artist Renji Shishijo. Karasuma doesn't buy it at all, thinking it is more likely she is just an obsessed fan or the author's daughter. While Karasuma continues to doubt her, Shijo begins sketching at high speed. He maintains that being an extreme fan fits her better than being the actual creator. Shijo presents a perfect drawing in her signature style as final proof. Karasuma finally loses his mind, realizing his school senpai is truly the famous Shishijo sensei. Karasuma works out that she must have debuted as a child and started her serialization in middle school. Shijo rubs her head and confesses her grades suffered because she spent all her time drawing. Karasuma wonders why her identity isn't public news. Shijo explains that she keeps her identity hidden so people read her manga without prejudice and to avoid drama at school. Karasuma asks if it was a mistake to tell him, but she says it was only fair after what happened. Shijo leans on her hand with a blush and admits she felt she had to be honest because she just witnessed his private confession. Karasuma is visibly shaken by the realization. Karasuma frantically asks exactly how much of the rejection she saw. Shijo tells him she saw every bit of it, adding that she practically lives in that room. Karasuma covers his face and begs her to forget the whole embarrassing ordeal. Shijo laughs and tells him he looked pretty cute throwing a tantrum after the rejection, making Karasuma call her a witch again. Shijo softens her tone and tells him his confession was actually very cool. She assures him that the girl definitely felt the sincerity of his love. Shijo gets blunt and asks what he actually likes about the girl, specifically questioning if it is her face or her chest. She even comments on the girl's figure, which makes Karasuma call her vulgar. Karasuma looks away and says he loves how happy the girl sounds when they talk about manga and the way she looks when she eats something she likes. Karasuma mentions he spent a long time preparing today's bento just for his crush, but the confession ruined his chance to give it to her. Shijo realizes the meal she just finished was the one intended for the other girl. Karasuma confirms it was for his crush, but tells Shijo she actually helped him out by eating it instead of letting it go to waste. Shijo looks down at the empty container she is holding. Shijo lets out a laugh, finally understanding why the food tasted so full of effort. Karasuma agrees that the flavor makes a lot of sense given the reason he made it. Shijo giggles and says that the hidden ingredient in Karasuma's bento was actually love. Karasuma is skeptical and asks if a professional manga artist should really be giving that kind of feedback, wondering if she is actually a grade schooler. Shijo confirms that his love is genuine and points out that the girl clearly treasures him too based on her expressions. She expresses frustration that he was rejected for such a ridiculous reason and declares that she will never accept such a plot development. Shijo leans in close to Karasuma and tells him to practice his drawing so he can change the girl's mind and win her over. Karasuma is taken aback by her sudden proximity and intensity. Shijo explains that by training to draw, Karasuma can distract himself from the pain of rejection while also improving his chances with the girl. Karasuma flatly refuses to go along with it. Karasuma argues that he and the girl were never meant to be in the same social circles anyway. Shijo counters that such a gap is exactly where drama comes from and starts writing down his character traits, noting his low motivation and honesty. She remarks that his pathetic energy makes him feel like a modern main character. Karasuma insists that the girl's excuse about only liking people who can draw was just a way to reject him specifically. Shijo tells him that is exactly the point she is trying to make. Shijo points out that people don't usually use such a specific reason for rejection unless they have their own secret reasons for doing so. Shijo asks Karasuma if he can feel that the girl isn't completely uninterested in him. Karasuma blushes and admits he can feel a little bit that she treasures him, which Shijo takes as a confirmation of her theory. Shijo proposes that since the girl likes her manga, she should be the one to teach Karasuma how to draw. She offers to help with everything from planning to editing, but Karasuma repeatedly declines. Karasuma says he can't possibly bother a famous author that much. Shijo tells him not to worry about being polite because helping him will benefit her as well. Shijo confesses that she has been in a creative slump, but meeting Karasuma has filled her with new ideas. She explains that she wants to be his wingwoman and support his efforts. Karasuma is even more hesitant once he realizes Shijo wants to use him as a model for her work. Shijo begs for his help and promises to compensate him properly. Karasuma looks down and says he doesn't have anything special in his life that would be of interest to a famous author. Karasuma explains that he simply couldn't hold back his feelings anymore this time. Shijo listens and agrees with his sentiment. Shijo admits that the feeling called love is exactly what she doesn't understand. Karasuma is shocked, wondering how that is possible since she writes such popular romance stories. Shijo blushes and looks away, dismissing rom-coms as mere fantasies. Karasuma watches her as she struggles to explain herself. Shijo confesses that despite receiving numerous crushes and confessions from others, she has never actually experienced the feeling of love herself. Seeing Karasuma's confession made Shijo realize for the first time that love truly exists in the real world. She admits that her own heart is currently beating fast. With a determined look, Shijo says she wants to witness the continuation of that confession and see what happens next. Karasuma stares back at her in silence, appearing completely caught off guard by her words. The two students stand in the quiet room looking at each other as the weight of the conversation settles. Shijo explains that she wants to experience youth for herself and asks Karasuma to teach her how to draw. Karasuma still thinks it is impossible for him to learn, but Shijo pushes back, insisting that anything is possible with enough time, motivation, and will. Karasuma reveals that he needs to save money for his family and plans to work a part-time job after school instead. Shijo is excited by his story, noting that he sounds just like a protagonist from a poor family. Karasuma explains that he simply lacks the time and energy to live up to her expectations. Shijo stares at him, looking stunned. Shijo apologizes for her behavior and admits she has a bad habit of speaking before thinking about other people's situations. Karasuma tries to tell her she doesn't need to apologize. Karasuma looks at her and feels that since she went so far to say all those things, his own feelings have already been reciprocated in some way. Karasuma presents the room, which he has already scrubbed completely clean, and says it is time for him to head home. Shijo is shocked by how tidy the place has become. Karasuma gives her a stern warning to eat properly, stating that it would be a problem for him if she got sick and couldn't draw her manga anymore. Shijo looks down in a gloomy mood. Karasuma admits that he is a bit lazy as well. Shijo reflects that she always ends up in this state whenever a deadline approaches. Shijo laughs and wonders if she should hire someone to take care of her chores. Karasuma calls out to her before he leaves. Karasuma asks if he can make a bento for her every day. Shijo blushes deeply and asks what he means by that. Karasuma suggests that he can take care of her chores if she teaches him how to draw while she works. He wants a workspace where he can use his skills. Shijo realizes this is a great idea and suggests hiring him as her disciple. Karasuma thinks that sounds nice. Shijo agrees, realizing it will improve her living conditions while allowing her to observe him for her manga. Shijo grabs his hands and promises to help him and the girl get together. In exchange, she demands that he show her his love. The two of them stare at each other intently. Outside the school building, Karasuma tells her he will leave the matter in her hands. Shijo tells Karasuma that he should call her master because starting with proper manners is important. She notes that having a witch disciple feels just like a manga plot and asks if he is okay with that. Karasuma looks at her with wide eyes. Shijo hands him a draft book and tells him to fill it up starting the very next day. Karasuma is shocked by the sudden start date as he leaves the room. The next morning at home, Karasuma's younger sister greets him as he puts on his shoes. Karasuma apologizes for waking her up, but she says it is fine. He tells her that breakfast is in the usual place and asks her to wake their mother up later before he opens the door to head out. A girl calls out to Karasuma from a window as he walks to school, asking why he is so early and if he joined a club. Karasuma tells her he is more like a caretaker. When she asks what kind of animal he is looking after, he thinks to himself that it is a witch while looking into the messy art prep room where Shijo is asleep on the couch. Shijo wakes up and asks if the rom-com main character has arrived. Karasuma asks if that is the first thing she has to say upon waking up. Shijo is shocked to learn he has a cute little sister and a childhood friend living next door. Shijo theorizes that his sister will develop a brother complex because he raises her like a parent and will eventually become her best friend. Karasuma bluntly tells her that will not happen. Shijo worries that the childhood friend is heading for a losing heroine route because Karasuma is obsessed with Fushimi. Karasuma asks if she is actually supposed to be the wingwoman for him and Fushimi. Shijo insists that he is the main character and she is the master, but Karasuma clears his throat and says that is not important. Shijo begins adjusting her clothes on the sofa, making Karasuma look away in embarrassment. She explains that she is weak in the mornings. Shijo apologizes for showing him such an unsightly appearance. Karasuma remarks that between her tripping on the floor and her dirty room, he has already seen enough. Karasuma realizes she really does sleep in the art prep room. Shijo says she only stays there when she gets busy. Shijo explains she borrows the room from the art teacher so she can concentrate on her work. She claims to be proud of her castle. Karasuma tells her not to brag about a room that is already messy again when he just cleaned it yesterday. Shijo laughs and says it is because she was pulling out reference materials. Shijo raises a piece of paper and says she was not making a mess for no reason. Karasuma stares at it in shock. Shijo holds up the page and reveals it is the raw draft of Love Riddle. Karasuma is amazed by the quality. Karasuma trembles as he realizes she drew the entire draft in a single day, finally accepting her identity as Shishijo-sensei. Shijo boasts about her speed with the pen. Fushimi asks if he is allowed to read the manuscript, and Shijo confirms that he is the very first reader to see it. He thanks her and begins to look through the pages. Fushimi is struck by how cute the character is and finds himself blushing. Shijo watches his reaction with a shy and happy expression. Shijo explains that she was able to draw so well because of the love Fushimi showed her, making the character even more adorable. She tells him to accept her gratitude, leaving him confused. Shijo suddenly presents a stack of cash and tells Fushimi it is his salary. Fushimi is completely shocked by the sudden payment. Fushimi frantically insists that he cannot accept the money, but Shijo laughs and tells him there is no need to hold back. Shijo explains that the amount is what she pays an assistant and includes her food expenses since ingredients cost money. She tells him he can just work hard to make up for it if he is worried. Fushimi accepts the arrangement and promises to do his best while making breakfast for her. Shijo happily tells him she is counting on him as her chef. Fushimi asks if she has any specific food requests since he has already bought various ingredients. Shijo takes a moment to think about what she wants. Shijo requests a large meal to celebrate finishing her manuscript that is also elegant enough to savor slowly. Fushimi finds the order annoying and complicated but agrees to give it a try as he starts cooking. As bacon and eggs sizzle in a pan, Shijo observes that Fushimi seems very skilled at cooking. He explains that he handles most of the chores at home and has simply gotten used to the work. Fushimi mentions that he enjoys cooking the most because he likes to imagine people being pleased with his food. Shijo watches him quietly as he finishes the preparations. Fushimi serves Shijo a warm bacon and egg sandwich. She reacts with excitement at the sight of the hot meal. Shijo takes a bite and describes the food as pure bliss. She is clearly delighted by the taste of the breakfast. Shijo expresses her appreciation for having an elegant breakfast after the chaotic ordeal of finishing her work. Fushimi tells her that her reaction is a bit much. Shijo finishes her meal and announces that it is time to discuss Fushimi's plan to find love. Fushimi is immediately critical of the weird name she gives the plan. Shijo recalls the reason the other girl rejected Fushimi and notes that while she wants him to start training immediately, drawing skills cannot be improved overnight. Fushimi reacts nervously. Shijo asks how many pages of the sketchbook she gave him yesterday he actually filled, suggesting several pages would have been a good goal. Fushimi sounds uncertain. Fushimi explains that he filled up every single page in the entire sketchbook exactly as she told him to do. Shijo is left speechless and wide-eyed by his incredible dedication. Fushimi mentions he is suffering from a lack of sleep because of the work as Shijo begins rapidly flipping through the pages. Shijo praises his accomplishment, noting he truly filled the whole book. Fushimi asks if her original request was meant to be a joke, but she clarifies that it wasn't. Shijo admits that he is the very first person to ever take her challenge so seriously. Shijo thinks to herself that he is like a protagonist who didn't run away and tells him to keep up the good work. She instructs him to start by getting used to drawing lines, feeling he is more like a hero from a sports manga. Shijo feels she made the right choice in taking him as a disciple, considering his motivation, patience, and talent for cooking. Shijo gazes at Fushimi while he remains deeply focused on his task at the desk. Feeling a sudden flood of inspiration from watching a young man in love, Shijo frantically scribbles down new ideas for her manuscript. Shijo decides that regardless of the reason, things are going to be very interesting from now on. Shijo tells Fushimi to wait for a moment while he works. Shijo leans in very close to Fushimi and tells him to look at the notes, advising him to use his shoulder strength for drawing. Fushimi jolts in surprise at the lack of personal space. Fushimi stammers that she is much too close to him, leaving Shijo looking startled by his outburst. Shijo is completely flustered and speechless after Karasuma tells her she is too close. Shijo realizes she is in the middle of a lucky pervert trope and decides to stay close to observe Karasuma's reaction for her manga research. Shijo leans in and asks Karasuma what he is whispering, making his heart race as she ignores his request for space. Shijo continues to press against Karasuma's back as she gives him more drawing advice. Karasuma is overwhelmed by the physical contact and finds it impossible to focus on anything else. Karasuma suddenly blurts out that he can feel her ribs, which leaves Shijo looking shocked and confused. Shijo reacts with silent, seething annoyance at Karasuma's unromantic and blunt comment. The school bell rings as Shijo sighs at Karasuma's total lack of tact. Shijo complains that high school boys are a pain to deal with and says she is worried about Karasuma's future while he offers a weak apology. Shijo looks at Karasuma's sketches of Fushimi and decides his passion is enough to work with, though she realizes there is a missing piece to the puzzle. Shijo looks out the window and decides she must find a way to learn how Fushimi truly feels. Fushimi stands at a window in another part of the school, having witnessed Karasuma's secret meeting with Shijo. Back in his classroom, Karasuma hears the bell ring and pauses to think as lunch break begins. Karasuma remains focused on his training, carefully drawing long lines and checking his references as he was taught. A classmate tells Karasuma it is time for lunch, but he suddenly stops when he notices the drawings inside Karasuma's notebook. A classmate notices the senior known as the witch and comments on her beauty. Karasuma is horrified to realize his master has come to his classroom. The students continue to gossip about how serious she looks while wondering why a senior is searching the first-year hallway. Shijo glances through the doorway with her hands in her pockets. Shijo begins walking directly toward Karasuma's desk, drawing everyone's attention as she approaches him. Shijo grabs Karasuma and aggressively asks if he is trying to kill her. He is shocked by the sudden confrontation while the rest of the class chatters in the background. Shijo pulls out her bento and shouts that the food was so spicy she almost died. Shijo demands that he stop putting spicy meat in her meals and then hands him a spare key so he can enter her room while she is sleeping. Karasuma is flustered as the key clinks into his hand. Shijo pinches her own face in embarrassment as she realizes the weight of her words. Karasuma quickly drags her out of the room. The classmates are left in a state of shock, whispering about the bento and the spare key while questioning what kind of relationship the two actually have. Fushimi stands alone in the hallway, looking at her phone with a troubled expression. Once they are back in the art room, Shijo gasps and asks why she was pulled away. Karasuma tells her that he has plenty of questions for her as well. Karasuma lectures her, explaining that yelling about bento and spare keys in a crowded classroom will make everyone misunderstand their relationship. Shijo is surprised that he cares about social perception, which only makes Karasuma more furious as he insists the problem affects both of them. The two argue about the spiciness of the lunch before Karasuma points out that Shijo will be in trouble if Fushimi-san gets the wrong idea. Shijo realizes he is right but expresses disappointment that his concern is focused on someone else. Shijo sinks to the floor in a state of total despair, apologizing and lamenting that she cannot believe she acted so recklessly. Karasuma looks at the drawing table and realizes she must have stayed up all night working. He suggests that sleep deprivation and hunger have clearly clouded her judgment. Karasuma promises to make her a new bento after school and tells her to get some rest before then. Shijo looks at him with wide, tearful eyes, clearly moved by his kindness. Shijo clings to Karasuma while loudly declaring her love for him. Karasuma tells her he understands and urges her to just go to sleep. The school day continues as the building stands quiet under the afternoon sky. Shijo wakes up later and starts tidying her room when someone opens the door. She assumes it is Karasuma and apologizes for her earlier behavior, saying she has been waiting for him. Shijo is shocked to see Fushimi standing at the entrance instead of Karasuma. Shijo realizes with a panic that Fushimi has found her. Fushimi is surprised and asks how Shijo knows who she is. Shijo realizes she cannot tell Fushimi that she witnessed her rejection or that she knows her through Karasuma. She struggles to come up with an excuse. Shijo laughs and lies, claiming she simply has information on all the pretty girls in the school. Fushimi says she knows Shijo as well, and Shijo hopes her fake persona as a well-informed senior is believable. Fushimi says she came to speak with the art teacher, but Shijo informs her that the teacher will be away for some time. Fushimi looks at a copy of the manga Love Riddle and mentions that a specific panel in the latest volume is one of her favorites. Shijo is stunned by the specific reference to her own work. Shijo decides to play dumb and claims she doesn't know much about that manga, asking which scene Fushimi was talking about. Fushimi accepts the answer and goes quiet. An incredibly awkward silence fills the room as Shijo tries to figure out what to do next. Shijo desperately wants to reveal herself as the author and ask Fushimi why she rejected Karasuma, but she knows it is not the right time for such questions. Shijo observes Fushimi closely, noting her sharp eyes and attractive features, thinking that she truly is as beautiful as a drawing. Fushimi breaks the silence by bluntly asking Shijo what her relationship is with Karasuma. Shijo is caught off guard by the intensity of Fushimi's question. She feels the pressure of the moment as the silence stretches between them. Shijo wonders if Fushimi is about to start trouble. She analyzes the situation, thinking about how Fushimi rejected Karasuma but might slowly be paying more attention to him and realizing he isn't so bad after all. Shijo imagines the scenario of a woman suddenly showing up and acting overly intimate with Karasuma. She notes Fushimi's visibly surprised and blushing reaction to the thought. Shijo concludes that Fushimi's heart is anxious and swinging back and forth despite the previous rejection. She continues to ponder the drama of the young man's love life. Shijo asks herself if Fushimi views her as a rival heroine in love. She wonders if she is being cast in that specific role. Shijo mentally laughs and dismisses the idea, thinking of herself as just a lazy heroine instead, and offering a silent apology for the confusion. Shijo decides on her cover story. She prepares to explain her connection to Karasuma while Fushimi waits patiently for an answer. Shijo settles on the word servant as the most fitting description for Karasuma. She adopts a smug tone to sell the act. Shijo tells Fushimi that Karasuma handles her daily chores in exchange for drawing lessons. She claims he is just a toy to make her life easier and that no love exists between them at all. Shijo decides to play the role of the villain to protect Karasuma's reputation. She wants to make it seem like she threatened him into this arrangement, so Fushimi won't think poorly of him for serving a senior. Shijo notices the bento Karasuma made and mentions she might promote him to butler since he takes the work seriously. She hopes to give Fushimi the impression that she will take him if Fushimi doesn't hurry up. Fushimi looks down and quietly acknowledges the information she has just been given. Fushimi looks up with a slight blush and says she is glad to hear that. Her positive response leaves Shijo completely stunned and confused. Fushimi announces she is leaving and heads for the exit. At the same time, Karasuma approaches the room from down the hallway. Fushimi passes right by Karasuma as she leaves the art prep room. Karasuma is left standing there in a state of total shock. Karasuma tentatively asks his master about the encounter that just took place, and she simply confirms that it happened. Karasuma worries if Shijo caused any trouble for Fushimi. Shijo defensively retorts that she went to great lengths to clear up Fushimi's misunderstandings about him. Shijo asks if he explained the situation to his classmates. Karasuma admits that he told them about his work arrangement but intentionally left out the part about being paid money. Karasuma explains that his classmates were very worried and asked if Shijo was threatening or bullying him. Shijo is initially bothered that she looks like a villain in those stories, but she quickly realizes that it matches the lie she just told Fushimi perfectly. Shijo encourages Karasuma to keep up his training, suggesting that Fushimi might actually care for him and that he still has a chance. Karasuma quietly hopes that she is right. Out in the hallway, Fushimi slowly slides down against the wall with a heavy expression. Fushimi tells herself that Shijo won't acknowledge her so easily and decides to call it a day. Fushimi is overcome with excitement and blushes deeply at the realization that she actually got to speak with Shishijo-sensei. Fushimi wonders if she is in a dream because her idol even knew her name, while Shijo suddenly shivers from a strange feeling. Shijo stares intently at a tablet showing a vibrant advertisement for an all-you-can-eat sweets buffet. Karasuma looks over her shoulder and comments on how amazing the various sweets look. Karasuma is surprised by her interest in pastries since he usually sees her eating plain sugar, but Shijo insists she is a young girl at heart. She tells him not to talk about her habits like she is an insect. Shijo explains that she is researching sweets for her manga because she was once mocked online for her poor drawings of food. Karasuma notes that she probably did not do it on purpose. Karasuma asks if the next chapter is about a date. Shijo confirms this is the case and explains that is why she is looking for a sweets shop setting. Karasuma tells his master that luxury sweets are fine, but if she wants to understand what ordinary students eat, they need to go out into the town. Karasuma and Shijo head out into the outside world together to begin their research in town. Shijo is amazed by the busy streets and the constant chatter of the people around them. Shijo is excited by the huge number of dessert shops and mentions they are doing research on dates. She points out that many students are in uniform, so Karasuma fits in even though she changed into casual clothes. Shijo explains her outfit was a gift from her editor for going outside. Karasuma looks nervous and tells her not to bring such clothes to school. Karasuma offers to guide them through the spots he researched beforehand, and Shijo happily agrees since she doesn't know where to start. She immediately decides they should get waffles first. Shijo is mesmerized by a waffle on a stick covered in strawberries and chocolate, calling the sight of it glorious and exciting. After taking a bite, Shijo exclaims that the sweetness of the fruit chocolate and waffle is hitting her happiness receptors. Karasuma nods along as she enjoys the treat. Shijo suddenly realizes she needs to take a photo for reference, but she laments that the waffle is already half-eaten. Shijo didn't expect a single treat to bring so much joy and decides that the matter requires further inquiry. Shijo spots a display of animal-shaped macarons and excitedly calls Karasuma over to look at them. Karasuma remarks that the macarons are so cute it would be a shame to eat them, but both he and Shijo start munching on them anyway. As they continue walking with even more treats like cotton candy and drinks, Karasuma asks if all of this will serve as a good reference for her work. Shijo admits that while she understands what is popular, these places are a bit too flashy and don't quite fit the specific scenes she was picturing. Karasuma suggests going to a cafe with a nice relaxed mood in the next town over. He offers to walk there since it isn't far, and Shijo reacts with excitement. Shijo thanks Karasuma but sighs, saying that being exposed to so much youthful energy has left her feeling spent. Karasuma starts to mention something that occurred to him. Karasuma tells Shijo she is kind of like an old lady. She reacts with outrage, asking how he could say such a thing to a beautiful young girl. He immediately tries to take it back. Karasuma clarifies that her way of talking feels mature and different from their peers. Shijo admits she is out of touch with society because she does nothing but draw manga. Shijo asks if Karasuma is doing all this research on sweets to prepare for when he finally goes out with Fushimi. Karasuma is caught off guard by the question. Karasuma blushes intensely and hides his face. Shijo is thrilled to realize she hit the nail on the head with her guess. Karasuma confesses that he only started researching because Fushimi talked about it so much that he became curious. Shijo's interest is fully piqued, and she tells Karasuma to escort her for the rest of the day as part of his practice for a real date. The two walk together through a bustling city district filled with large buildings and advertisements. They continue walking along the brick sidewalk, passing by various cafes and shops. Shijo points toward a row of capsule toy machines as they wander through the commercial district. Karasuma checks his phone as they walk, thinking that even simple time spent walking or waiting feels significant. Shijo looks a bit exhausted from the outing while Karasuma watches her. Sitting in a quiet cafe, Shijo reflects sadly on the fact that she has been drawing all this time without truly knowing any of the experiences they had today. Shijo closes her eyes and blushes as she processes her thoughts. Shijo suddenly begins scribbling furiously in her notebook, announcing that she needs to rework her entire plot based on what she learned. Shijo blushes intensely as she realizes that their research outing feels exactly like a real date. Shijo sips her drink while thinking that the situation is straight out of a rom-com. She wonders if Karasuma got too excited and went all out, telling herself this must be research, despite her embarrassment. A large bowl of special shaved ice labeled as a couple's size is served to their table. Shijo is shocked and yells out in disbelief. Shijo asks Karasuma if he really wants to the dessert and pretend to be a couple for the day. She blushes and warns him not to get the wrong idea, insisting it is only so she can draw sweets. Shijo admits she has always wanted to try a treat like this, but never had the courage or time to eat it by herself. Karasuma smiles and tells Shijo that he is grateful to be able to do this research with her. The sincerity of his words makes Shijo's heart pound. Shijo frantically tries to compose herself, shaking her head while Karasuma watches her with a confused expression. Shijo clutches her chest and tells herself that manga has completely messed up her perception, panicking because her heart is racing. Shijo tries to distance herself from the feeling, reminding Karasuma that this is just practice for when he eventually goes on a date with Fushimi. Karasuma confirms that this is exactly why they are doing a rehearsal, which leaves Shijo looking somewhat dejected. Suddenly, Fushimi walks into the same cafe where they are eating. Shijo spots Fushimi entering and is frozen in terror. Shijo panics, thinking the situation is disastrous. When Karasuma asks if the food tastes bad, she grabs his head and points him toward the newcomer. Fushimi enters the room as Karasuma realizes he had mentioned this specific cafe to her. Shijo trembles at how much this resembles a manga scenario. Shijo is overcome with anxiety, worrying that if Fushimi sees them together, she won't be able to come up with any believable excuse. Karasuma starts to sweat as he wonders how to handle the situation with Fushimi nearby. Shijo stares ahead with a sudden look of intense focus on her face. Shijo tells Karasuma that it is okay and to leave everything to her. She picks up a spoon and prepares to take action. Shijo begins eating the entire couple-sized dessert at high speed to get rid of the evidence. Karasuma is stunned that she intends to finish it all by herself while she tells him to watch and learn. Shijo declares that Karasuma is nothing more than her servant. She tells him that if he feels indebted for the meal, he can just treat her to another one later. Shijo believes that by acting so aggressively, no one could possibly mistake their meeting for a date. She calls Karasuma a boy and drags him toward the exit. A woman in the cafe watches them leave, whispering that the girl must be the legendary witch from the rumors and looks quite dangerous. Fushimi stands at the counter and tells the staff member that she wants to order the exact same thing the small girl was eating earlier. Outside the cafe, Shijo groans in pain and clutches her stomach because she overate. Karasuma holds his head in his hand, feeling like a massive misunderstanding is about to occur. Karasuma pulls out his phone and asks Shijo if she uses the Lime messaging app. Shijo pauses with her chopsticks in her mouth and looks at him with a startled expression. Karasuma explains that having her contact information would be less troublesome than her coming to his classroom every time something happens. Shijo looks embarrassed as she recalls her previous outburst and offers a quiet apology. Karasuma asks if she actually knows how to add a friend on the app. Shijo insists that she definitely knows what she is doing as she starts tapping on her screen. Shijo boasts that she has friends on the app, though she admits it is mostly just her editor. Karasuma mentions the texting scenes she drew in her manga and wonders if she really has experience with it. Shijo prepares to shake her phone to find his profile, but Karasuma informs her that the shaking feature was removed a long time ago. He suggests using the QR code instead while she looks flustered. Shijo tells Karasuma to contact her whenever he feels the need to talk to a pretty girl. Karasuma gives a lukewarm agreement as the school day ends. Shijo giggles to herself while staring at her phone, clearly pleased with the fact that they finally swapped contact information. Throughout the weekend, Shijo constantly checks her phone for messages while relaxing on the sofa drinking tea and even while working on her manga. Shijo's phone finally buzzes with a notification, making her jump with excitement. She wonders what took him so long and prepares to offer him whatever love advice he might need. Shijo hugs a cushion on the sofa and reminds herself to stay calm. She is worried that if she acts too excited, Karasuma will find another reason to make fun of her. Shijo sends a message and waits eagerly for his response, wondering if he will like her reply. The chat log shows Karasuma asking what she wants to eat tomorrow and whether she prefers meat or fish. Shijo picks meat and tells him to buy expensive ingredients, then blushes as she realizes they sound like a cohabiting couple. Shijo kicks her legs in a fit of embarrassment and growls into the sofa cushions. She feels frustrated because she doesn't know what a normal level of closeness is supposed to be. At home, Karasuma's sister notices that he has been using the Lime app a lot lately. Karasuma defensively claims that his constant texting is just for business. Karasuma arrives at the art room and sees Shijo in a pitiful state, wondering where her usual dignity has gone. Shijo looks completely drained and dreary as she sits slumped at her desk. She tells Karasuma she is glad he came because she accidentally passed out while working. Karasuma enters the cluttered room and finds Shijo surrounded by trash and papers. Shijo apologizes for him seeing her like this, but Karasuma says it is fine. Karasuma rolls up his sleeves and prepares to clean up, explaining that he expected the room to get messy over the weekend. Shijo finds it disappointing that he is so unfazed by the situation. Shijo peels a cooling patch off her forehead and tells herself she should come up with an excuse for her appearance. Karasuma remarks that this is just business as usual for them anyway. Karasuma asks if a certain situation occurred, and Shijo confirms that she faced the problem that is the bane of all mangakas. Shijo is completely overwhelmed by stress and shouts that her deadline is rapidly approaching. Karasuma looks on with concern. Shijo admits that the deadline is tomorrow morning and she is so far behind that she doesn't even want to know how much work is left. She starts twitching from the pressure while Karasuma watches her struggle. Karasuma realizes she really is out of time, and Shijo laments that her life is a constant battle. Karasuma seems strangely energetic despite the crisis. Shijo explains that she usually manages her schedule fine, but the research trip they took required her to redraw sections of the manga, which cost her valuable time. Karasuma notices the pile of trash and asks Shijo about her diet and if she has even found time to shower. Shijo admits she has been neglecting everything else for her work. Shijo suddenly retreats into her sweater and blushes, telling Karasuma he should probably keep his distance from her since she hasn't bathed. Karasuma is left confused by her reaction. Karasuma offers to help but worries that he might just get in the way of her professional work. Shijo reassures him that it is not a problem. Shijo confidently claims that she knows a very capable guy who can teach Karasuma everything he needs to know about assisting. Karasuma asks if she already called the person over, and just then a loud clack comes from the door. Shijo remarks that the person has arrived right on time. The art teacher Yuji-kun walks into the room wearing a casual flowery shirt. Shijo introduces him to a shocked Karasuma as her assistant. Shijo explains that while he appears to be just a dull art teacher, he is actually a super assistant capable of finishing entire manuscripts by himself. Shijo brags that he has survived the carnage of working for numerous mangakas. Yuji-kun tells her to stop introducing him like he is some kind of assassin. Yuji-kun explains that he considers himself more of a substitute guardian and only helps out as a last resort because he doesn't want Shijo to die from overworking. Shijo mentions that she pays him very well for his help, but Yuji-kun sulks and says the money doesn't matter since she is the one making the real profit. Karasuma watches them and asks if it is actually allowed for a teacher to have a side job like this. Yuji-kun calmly takes a drink as he listens. Yuji-kun takes a slow sip of his drink while Shijo looks on waiting for him to address Karasuma's question about whether teachers can have side jobs. Yuji-kun completely ignores the question and notes that since Karasuma is willing to help, he must show real determination. Shijo is shocked that he just brushed the topic aside. Yuji-kun turns serious and warns Karasuma that they are no longer on a playground. He states that facing a professional manuscript is the same as entering a battlefield. Shijo pokes Yuji-kun and tells him to stop scaring her cute disciple so much. Yuji-kun groans from the poke while Karasuma stands by looking nervous. Karasuma looks at the teacher and admits that while the prospect is scary, he is ready to face it. Karasuma declares with firm determination that if this is what is necessary for him to improve, then he wants to do it. Shijo remarks that the conversation has become very heated and shonen-esque. Yuji-kun remains skeptical, saying that anyone can talk a big game. Yuji-kun agrees to let him help, but only after he fills an entire notebook with practice lines to get used to drawing. Karasuma begins the task, but thinks the forced practice is totally absurd. Yuji-kun asks to discuss the task assignments. Shijo hands over her pages and tells him that she is ready to go. Yuji-kun flips through the manuscript and notes that the drawings of the sweets are very nice. He realizes the story is about a date. Yuji-kun is visibly moved as he looks at the draft, seeing the quality of the scenes inspired by Karasuma and Shijo's research trip. Yuji-kun continues to study the pages in silence while Shijo watches him with a nervous expression. Shijo smiles warmly and tells Yuji-kun that the high quality of the work is all thanks to Karasuma. Yuji-kun closes his eyes and quietly reflects on how amazing the power of love truly is. Shijo is completely pumped and tells the others to leave everything to her. She calculates that if she inks a page every 30 minutes, the work will be much easier to finish. Shijo screams in despair while drawing, crying that the work is useless and that there is no end to the incoming pages. Karasuma asks if she is all right, but Yuji-kun dismisses it as a simple tantrum. Yuji-kun offers energy drinks as a solution, but Karasuma worries about the health risks while marveling at how Shijo keeps drawing despite her mental breakdown. Karasuma ties on his apron and promises to protect his master's health. Shijo stops when she catches a pleasant scent wafting through the room. Karasuma tells Shijo to have the meal he prepared, and she pauses her work to look at him. Shijo is ecstatic to see a bowl of warm pork miso soup, declaring that it is exactly what she was craving the most. Shijo slurps the soup and feels the flavor permeate her entire body, looking much happier. Shijo says the food is comforting and full of love, thanking him and saying she can now finish the work. Karasuma notes that she has finally calmed down. Shijo rests contentedly while Karasuma returns to the kitchen to continue his chores. Yuji-kun looks on silently with a tired expression. Yuji-kun calls out to Karasuma as he looks over the manuscript. Yuji-kun holds up a page and asks Karasuma if he can take care of the finishing touches. Karasuma excitedly agrees to help taking the page while Shijo remains focused on her own drawing tasks. Karasuma begins carefully inking the lines of the characters, following the instructions he was given. Shijo works silently and intensely at her desk to meet the deadline. Morning arrives at the school as Karasuma stands outside looking completely worn out after the long night of work. The morning sun shines through the window of the art prep room, lighting up the kitchen area and the messy workspace. Shijo is fast asleep on the sofa, finally resting peacefully now that the work is complete. Karasuma wobbles from exhaustion as he stands on the stairs with Yuji-kun. He marvels at the fact that they were really able to finish the manuscript, and the teacher agrees they managed to do it somehow. Yuji-kun is impressed that Karasuma still has classes to attend after staying up all night while he considers just going to rest. Karasuma tells the teacher not to skip his own classes. Yuji-kun admits he was genuinely surprised by the quality of the manuscript this time around. Yuji-kun asks if the two of them went out for research. Karasuma confirms they did, though it resulted in a very tight schedule to meet the deadline. Tears begin to trickle down Yuji-kun's face, leaving Karasuma completely shocked by the sudden emotional display. Yuji-kun sniffs and apologizes for being so strict earlier. He explains that Shijo has a hard time because no decent person approaches her once they find out she is a mangaka. Yuji-kun sobs that Shijo has never had any real friends because of her work. Karasuma watches him, thinking the teacher is acting like a doting parent. As Shijo works at her desk, Yuji-kun believes that while she is a genius, her tendency to get absorbed in manga makes her underestimate reality. He thinks needing to experience reality will eventually become an obstacle for her. Yuji-kun notes that this manuscript was very different from her previous ones because it felt truly vibrant. Yuji-kun tells Karasuma that he is counting on him to show Shijo a lot of different things about the world. Karasuma promises to handle the task and tells the teacher to leave everything to him. Karasuma vows that he will meet Shijo's expectations and succeed in making Fushimi like him back. Yuji-kun is left staring in complete confusion at Karasuma's sudden declaration. Yuji-kun is confused about who Fushimi is, and Karasuma admits she is the person he likes. The teacher then asks if Karasuma and Shijo are actually dating, but Karasuma quickly denies it. Karasuma claims that Shijo only sees him as an interesting toy and that she is only devoted to her manga. A text box notes that outsiders might find their relationship strange and wonders if they realize their own feelings. Karasuma announces that he is going to take a shower now. He heads out the door as Yuji-kun watches him go. Yuji-kun looks at the sleeping Shijo and thinks that manga isn't the only thing she cares about. Shijo wakes up and looks at a drawing in a sketchbook. She is impressed by how good it looks. Shijo tells Karasuma that the work he did is really good while she eats her bento on the sofa. Karasuma acts smug and says he is proud of the work because he figured out her tastes. Shijo realizes he thinks she is talking about the bento he made. Shijo clarifies that while the bento is good, she was actually praising his art. Karasuma is genuinely surprised that he improved so much in such a short amount of time. Shijo boastfully claims his improvement is due to her being a great teacher. Karasuma hesitantly agrees that she might be right. Shijo thinks to herself that things are going well and that if they continue, Karasuma might start to show his love. She sips tea while Karasuma continues to draw. Yuji-kun suddenly delivers bad news, telling them that their club is going to be disbanded. Both Shijo and Karasuma are frozen in total shock by the sudden announcement. They protest the decision, asking why it happened so suddenly. Shijo thinks she knows the reason, but Yuji-kun tells her that he let her off for that specific issue and not to worry. Shijo wonders if the prize she won for a painting was enough to prove the club's worth. Karasuma is amazed that she wins art awards so casually. Yuji-kun explains that the issue is simply a lack of members, as a club with only 2 people cannot be recognized. He warns them they will lose the art room if the club is dissolved. Yuji-kun tells the pair that they must find at least 1 more member by next week or the club will be disbanded. Karasuma is shocked by the short time frame, while Shijo worries that they will lose their dedicated club room. Shijo suddenly becomes excited, thinking that a club disbanding crisis is a fun trope from manga. Karasuma is annoyed by her happy reaction and points out that this isn't a fictional story. Karasuma declares that he will go find someone willing to join the club. Shijo admits she doesn't trust his recruiting skills, but acknowledges that losing her workplace would be a major problem. Karasuma returns to the room looking completely defeated and gloomy after failing his recruitment attempt. Karasuma reports that the art room's reputation is terrible and students are afraid of being sacrificed to the witch. Shijo looks dejected and apologizes for her reputation being such an obstacle. Karasuma asks what she could have possibly done to drive away all the previous members. Shijo nervously claims she did nothing wrong, but Karasuma tells her that's exactly what a guilty person says. Shijo suggests saving up money to bribe a new member into joining, but Karasuma warns her that getting caught would only make things worse. He decides to try asking students in other grades after school instead. Shijo decides to ask people in her own classroom, not wanting her disciple to do all the work. Karasuma reminds her that she doesn't actually have any friends in her class, which she reluctantly admits is true. Shijo sits hunched over at her desk in her classroom while the other students chat nearby. Shijo hides her face behind her arms, realizing she is too intimidated by the murmurs of her classmates to actually speak to them. She feels it is impossible to approach anyone when they look at her that way. Shijo remains at her desk and questions why she is even trying so hard to save the club. Shijo looks at the empty sofa in the art room and tells herself it doesn't matter if she loses the room or leaves school as long as she can keep drawing manga. Karasuma stares ahead with a look of intense and serious focus. A hand diligently draws manga lines onto a page with a pen. Shijo looks toward Karasuma with a surprised and confused expression on her face. Shijo blushes and wonders if she actually likes her current life and being around Karasuma more than she thought she would. Shijo recovers her composure and tells the class rep that she enjoys the club because it is the only place she can observe a high school boy so closely for her research. The class rep, Umiya Nano, apologizes for watching her so closely and says she could not help it because Shijo's expressions were so cute. Shijo is embarrassed that she was being so obvious. Nano giggles and calls Shijo a strange person. Shijo tries to act cool and admits she was just lost in thought, but then she struggles to remember Nano's name. Nano introduces herself as the class rep and mentions that she heard the art club is in danger of being disbanded. Shijo is surprised that the rumors have already spread so far. Nano assures Shijo that the other members quitting was not really her fault. Shijo admits she is having trouble recruiting new people because of her reputation. Nano explains the real reason people left. Students originally joined because they liked Shijo, but they could not handle the heavy atmosphere she created and felt pushed away. Shijo is stunned to hear the revelation that her own intensity was the cause of the club's atmosphere worsening and driving people away. Shijo realizes she never noticed the effect she had on others and recalls falling into a slump because of it. Nano smiles and says she never thought Shijo was a bad person. Nano reassures Shijo that she will find a way to save the club and mentions that she actually knows someone who is interested in joining. Nano explains that the potential member was afraid of the rumors about the witch, but she will explain that Shijo is not scary. Shijo says that would be a huge help. Nano asks Shijo to attend class more often in exchange for her help, admitting it gets lonely having an empty seat next to her. Shijo happily agrees to the deal. Nano giggles to herself and hopes that her efforts will keep Karasuma from worrying so much about his master. Back in the art room, Shijo informs Karasuma that the club's disbanding crisis has been averted for the time being. Shijo brags that she can make friends easily if she tries, but Karasuma points out that the class rep probably did all the work. He wonders what kind of person is planning to join the club. Karasuma worries about their situation, but Shijo tells him not to fret because it is their problem and no one else's. She notes they might have to draw things besides manga just to keep up appearances, and Karasuma says he is already aware of that. Shijo blushes and tells Karasuma that even if things get bothersome, having him there is good enough for her. Karasuma looks quite surprised by her sudden, sincere words. Karasuma wags a finger and remarks that it would definitely be bad if he weren't there since her stomach needs his cooking. Shijo looks away while he points out how much she relies on him. Shijo explains that her recent draft was only possible because of his help. Karasuma acknowledges this quietly while they both recall the effort put into the drawing. Shijo gazes intently at Karasuma and tells him that she needs him right now and cannot continue without his love. Karasuma is left completely stunned by her intense declaration. The door suddenly opens, revealing Fushimi standing there with a stoic and serious expression. Karasuma and Shijo both stare toward the entrance in shocked silence, realizing they were just interrupted at a very awkward moment. Karasuma asks Fushimi why she is there, and she reveals that she applied for the club because a senior asked her to. Karasuma is shocked to realize she is the potential new member they were hoping for. Fushimi turns to leave, stating that after seeing them together, she feels like she would only be getting in the way. Karasuma and Shijo both freak out and scream for her to wait. Shijo frantically tries to explain that Fushimi has it all wrong and that she only meant Karasuma's devotion to his work. She insists she was just expressing appreciation for her servant, leaving Fushimi thoughtful. Fushimi blushes and places a hand on her chest as she asks Shijo to make her a servant as well. Karasuma and Shijo are both utterly confused by the sudden request. Fushimi points out that if Karasuma isn't someone special, then there shouldn't be any issue with her joining as a servant too. Karasuma tells Fushimi to wait and warns her that she should stop while she still can. Shijo looks on with a nervous expression as he tries to intervene. Karasuma explains that Shijo has such poor life skills that looking after her is like taking care of a large baby. He warns Fushimi that she will fall into despair the moment a mess starts to accumulate and suggests she take back her request. Fushimi simply gives a short response of agreement, indicating she is undeterred. Karasuma and Shijo are left looking very uneasy about the new arrangement. Fushimi looks down with a dark expression and says she already knew everything Karasuma just mentioned. Karasuma and Shijo are both stunned by her lack of hesitation. Close-up views show Karasuma and Shijo sweating in shock, while Fushimi maintains a calm and determined gaze. Shijo slumps over the table in total defeat, realizing the situation is hopeless. Karasuma stands over her looking worried while Fushimi watches them silently. The news travels quickly through the school that Shijo has done something outrageous again. Students gossip in the hallway about the terrible atmosphere in the art club. Yuji-kun stands by a window listening as they complain that the genius girl doesn't care about anyone else. Shijo runs through the hallway and calls out to Yuji-kun as he walks away. Shijo catches her breath and asks Yuji-kun to cover for her for a little while. He looks at her with his usual tired expression. Yuji-kun asks if something happened. Shijo looks down, hesitating to explain the situation. Shijo looks up with excitement, holding her pen and declaring she has a great idea that she needs to draw right now. She says she cannot afford to let her pen stay still. Shijo stares intensely at Yuji-kun while he looks back at her with an exhausted, sweat-beaded face. Yuji-kun tells her he understands and leads her down the hallway, telling her to come with him. Yuji-kun opens a cluttered storage room and tells Shijo she can use it whenever she has a manuscript emergency. He notes that he is the only one who ever comes there, and Shijo asks if he is serious. Yuji-kun says it is better than her causing trouble in other places. Shijo thanks him for giving her the room. Shijo looks around and notices the room even has running water and a fridge. She claims she just needs a couch to live there, which makes Yuji-kun wonder what she is planning. Yuji-kun asks Shijo if she is really fine since there are so many rumors going around about her. Shijo starts drawing and absent-mindedly agrees that she is fine. Shijo dismisses the rumors as trivial nonsense. She claims that something about her simply hurts other people's feelings. Yuji-kun looks at Shijo while she draws and thinks that while her hurt self is cute, she is increasingly losing interest in the real world. Yuji-kun walks away thinking it is only a matter of time before she wants to quit school. He suddenly remembers that an old couch might still be in the parlor. Shijo is shown fast asleep. A narration bubble notes that she sure does seem to be enjoying a good sleep. Yuji-kun looks at the sleeping Shijo and remarks that she does not even realize the hassle he went through to sort out her mess. Yuji-kun reflects that thanks to sorting out the room, he was able to see something special, which is enough for him. Yuji-kun realizes there will be more trouble if he does not find another club member, but then he quickly dismisses the concern. Yuji-kun decides to leave it to the kids to sort out the situation as Karasuma and Shijo walk together down the school hallway. The author Rimukoro introduces themselves and thanks the readers for acquiring the first volume. They mention that they were doing their previous work fully as a hobby until the very end. The author explains that they wanted to try writing an orthodox rom-com next. They first needed a heroine who was an arrogant, lazy, domineering genius petite bishoujo mangaka. The author further describes the character as an incorrigible person who lives for her hobby. They note that since stacked gals have become popular in the current era, they definitely wanted to read something like this. The author continues thinking about the development of the story. The author decides that since they wanted to read such a story, they might as well just draw it, and thus they started drawing. A recap of the previous chapter explains that, as the party started recruiting, a demon lord appeared. Karasuma and Shijo look completely terrified by Fushimi's presence. Shijo realizes this is actually a really good opportunity. She thinks that if things go well, they can avoid disbanding the club, and she can observe the love between Karasuma and Fushimi up close. Shijo thinks that someone needs to do something about the incredibly tense atmosphere in the room. Karasuma and Fushimi sit in silence while Karasuma breaks into a nervous sweat. Shijo asks Fushimi if she is able to draw, but Fushimi admits that she is not exactly an artist herself. Fushimi explains that although she doesn't draw, she loves looking at drawings and even has a dedicated social media account where she follows hundreds of artists. Fushimi says that everyone likes looking at drawings, but Shijo asks if she is the type that only admires work from skilled artists. Shijo suddenly has a realization. Shijo suggests that Fushimi should become an art model for the club instead. She points out that Fushimi would get a drawing just by posing and that it would be fun to see how others interpret her through art. Fushimi quietly considers the offer before agreeing to help. Karasuma and Shijo look on with uncertainty. Fushimi says she will do her best as she suddenly starts taking off her school blazer. The unexpected action catches Karasuma and Shijo completely off guard. Fushimi gets embarrassed and says taking off anything more than her blazer is a bit much. Karasuma frantically tells her that she doesn't have to undress at all, while Shijo argues that lighter clothing makes for an easier drawing and insists she is not being malicious. Karasuma whispers to Shijo, asking what she is planning and what is actually happening. Shijo admits she wants to know as well. Shijo drags a sofa into place and suggests that talking while they draw might help lighten the mood. Mentally, she tells Karasuma that this is his big opportunity. Shijo tells Karasuma to show her what he is really capable of. She notes to herself that there is something more going on. Fushimi tries to speak up while Shijo watches with delight, thinking that the awkward communication between the two through drawing is a beautiful scene to witness. Fushimi asks what kind of pose she should take, so Shijo asks Karasuma if he has any specific requests. Karasuma is shocked that the decision is being left to him. Karasuma stammers and tells Fushimi to just sit normally because he is too embarrassed to make a request. Shijo thinks to herself that he is acting like a total chicken. Fushimi settles into a pose on the sofa while Shijo and Karasuma begin to sketch her. Shijo continues her sketch and says she will be honest about her thoughts. Shijo tells Fushimi that she is truly picturesque and the ideal cool girl. Fushimi blushes and thanks her. Shijo admits that Fushimi does not seem like the type of person who would read a manga like Love Chronicle. Fushimi explains that while there are not many people around her to talk to about manga, she believes everyone should read it. Shijo finds this quite a statement. Fushimi reveals that fashion is only half of her interest and serves as a facade. Karasuma and Shijo listen intently as they work. Fushimi states that she would not care if people found out she was an otaku. Shijo watches her with a serious look. Shijo panics, internally worried she stepped on a landmine. She feels the conversation meant to ease the tension is only making it worse. Shijo struggles to understand Fushimi recalling her intimidating gaze and her own awkward statement about Karasuma being a servant. Shijo wonders what Fushimi is really thinking behind her cold expression, doubting her own ability to handle the situation with her current communication skills. Fushimi is shown to be extremely nerve-wracked, finding it difficult to even speak a single word. Fushimi reflects on the situation, happy that Shishijo-sensei picked her as a model and complimented her. She hopes for another compliment and wonders what emotion she should show next. Shijo studies Fushimi's features, noting her droopy eyes, cat-like mouth, petite figure, and silky hair, thinking she looks like a cute little creature. Fushimi blushes, deeply overwhelmed by how cute Shijo is in person. She feels blessed to be in the presence of such a cute author. Fushimi thinks about the closeness between Karasuma and Shijo. She finds it hard to believe they do not have romantic feelings despite Shijo calling him her servant. Fushimi prays, silently convinced that Shijo's denial of romantic feelings for Karasuma is nothing but a massive lie. Shijo tells Karasuma to take a good look at Fushimi as they work. She realizes she let her mind wander too far into her own thoughts while Fushimi sits quietly on the sofa. Shijo leans in very close to Karasuma to inspect his progress on the sketch. Fushimi watches them with a shocked expression, wondering why they are being so physically close to each other. Fushimi thinks to herself that the two of them are committing a crime without even knowing it. Karasuma and Shijo remain focused on the artwork, completely oblivious to her growing frustration. Shijo lets out a cry of fear when she sees Fushimi glaring at her with a menacing and intense gaze. Fushimi mutters that she wishes she knew how to draw, causing Shijo to jolt in surprise. Karasuma looks over at them with a worried face. Karasuma stands up and walks across the room to speak with Fushimi. Karasuma asks Fushimi if she wants to try learning how to draw from Shijo. Shijo looks uncertain about the suggestion. Shijo begins giving Fushimi an art lesson, demonstrating how to hold a pencil and telling her to roughly sketch while looking at the target carefully. Karasuma goes to sit on the sofa in the background. Fushimi is completely flustered by Shijo's proximity. She blushes deeply and finds it overwhelming to have Shijo's voice speaking right into her ear. Fushimi is distracted by Shijo's hair tickling her and the scent of ink and a sweet fragrance coming from her. She is too self-conscious to pay attention to the drawing. Shijo asks if Fushimi is doing okay or if any part of the lesson was too hard to understand. Fushimi stammers that the lesson isn't the issue. Fushimi covers her mouth and admits she has already reached her limit. Shijo is confused and asks if she is truly fine. Shijo and Karasuma are both shocked by Fushimi's sudden breakdown. Shijo wonders if she went a bit too far with her teaching methods. Fushimi says she will be leaving because she feels like her presence is just causing more trouble for them. Shijo tries to stop her, explaining that having her leave would be an even bigger problem for the club. Fushimi tells them not to worry about the club disbanding because they can use her name as a ghost member. Fushimi apologizes to Shijo and Karasuma for making the situation uncomfortable. Fushimi explains that she has always been bad at talking and that her head spins out of control whenever she gets nervous. Karasuma and Shijo are shocked to realize that the intense pressure they felt from Fushimi was just a result of her poor communication skills. Fushimi says she won't be showing up much anymore now that she has joined the club and walks out the door. Karasuma tells Shijo he will go get Fushimi and runs out of the room after her. Karasuma catches up to Fushimi in the hallway and calls out her name to stop her. Karasuma tells Fushimi that despite her shyness, she was getting along with the class today and he enjoyed talking with her. Karasuma thinks back to seeing Fushimi pose and realizes that her discomfort wasn't because of his presence. Karasuma asks Fushimi directly if she likes Shijo. Fushimi stares back at Karasuma with a stunned and wide-eyed expression. Karasuma waits for a response after asking Fushimi if she has feelings for Shijo. Fushimi remains silent and looks away while Karasuma watches her in the hallway. Fushimi looks down at the floor and quietly confirms that he is right. Fushimi finally admits that she does indeed like Shijo. Karasuma looks stunned and sweats nervously after Fushimi's confession. Fushimi asks Karasuma if he has feelings for Shijo as well. Karasuma frantically denies it, explaining that he only takes care of her because of a strange set of circumstances. Fushimi reaches into her bag and begins rummaging through it while Karasuma watches her. Fushimi pulls out a copy of Shijo's manga and asks Karasuma if he does everything for Shijo because he truly cares about her as a person. Karasuma stares at the manga volume in silence, appearing deeply troubled. A bottle drops into the vending machine slot with a loud thud as Karasuma acknowledges the situation. Karasuma hands a drink to Fushimi, who is sitting on the floor, and notes that she must have known Shijo's secret identity from the very start. Fushimi nods repeatedly while Karasuma observes that her intense tension finally makes sense now that he knows she is a massive fan of Shijo's work. Fushimi explains that she was so captivated by the drawings that she became desperate to know who the artist was. Karasuma asks how she managed to find out when even the internet has no information on the subject. Fushimi admits that she heard strange rumors from non-club members and decided to infiltrate the former art club's online community using a fake account. Karasuma is shocked by her dedication. Fushimi explains that she eventually found Shijo's face in a reflection within a photo of some unpublished drafts. Karasuma is absolutely baffled that she went to such lengths. Fushimi says she was certain it was Shijo because she had seen her art in an exhibition before. Karasuma tells her that the issue is her methods, not whether she recognized the art or not. Fushimi says her visit to the clubroom with Karasuma confirmed everything. Karasuma points out that anyone could have figured it out since Shijo leaves her manuscripts lying around in the open. Karasuma expresses his worry over how careless Shijo is with her secret. He adds that he even has to remind her to lock the clubroom door when she goes to sleep. Back in the clubroom, Shijo sits alone at her desk and suddenly sneezes. Shijo grows impatient in the clubroom and wonders what is taking Karasuma and Fushimi so long. Shijo paces around the room and fidgets, worrying that the two of them might not even be coming back. Shijo considers if the persuasion is just dragging on or if Karasuma failed and is slowly returning, but she suddenly realizes something else might be happening. Shijo recalls Karasuma's resolve to get Fushimi and wonders where he went as she looks out into the hallway. Karasuma stands up and suggests that it will be easier for Fushimi to talk to Shijo now, but Fushimi suddenly grabs his shirt to stop him from leaving. Fushimi desperately begs Karasuma not to tell Shijo that she already knows her secret identity as a manga artist. Karasuma notes that Shijo likely wants to keep her identity hidden, while Fushimi worries that Shijo would think she had an ulterior motive if she knew the truth. Karasuma points out that Fushimi actually does have an ulterior motive, and she tells him that the remark was unnecessary. Fushimi worries that she would be seen as a creepy stalker if the truth were revealed, and claims she wouldn't be able to live with the shame. Shijo finds Karasuma and Fushimi sitting together in the hallway and decides to observe them from a distance for a bit longer. Shijo becomes frustrated because she is too far away to hear a single word of their conversation. Shijo realizes she cannot get any closer and tries to think of manga scenarios to explain the situation, but she is unable to come up with anything. Shijo sits down on the floor and decides to try and fill in the blanks using the few muffled words she can actually catch. Karasuma tells Fushimi that the situation was all thanks to her, while Fushimi mentions that she will go to a different shop next time. Shijo overhears fragments about a date and going to a shop and becomes extremely flustered as her heart begins to race. Karasuma denies the shaved ice trip was a date, claiming Shijo forced him into it. He then asks Fushimi if she would like to go to a different shop with him next time. Fushimi tells Karasuma to think of the trip as a reward for all his hard training. Shijo overhears the word reward and her heart begins to race. Fushimi explains she only wanted to try the same food her idol ate. Karasuma asks if she plans to eat it all by herself. Karasuma invites Fushimi to come visit the art club whenever she likes. Karasuma specifically asks Fushimi to join the Shishiju Support Alliance. Fushimi looks at him in surprise. Karasuma explains that there is a limit to how much he can protect Shijo's secret alone, so having another person who understands would help. Shijo is shocked to hear them discussing her secret. Fushimi expresses concern that returning to the clubroom would be extremely awkward, but Karasuma insists it is fine. Karasuma claims Shijo is the type of person who makes a fuss and won't mind the awkwardness, even if her sense of distance is skewed. Shijo overhears him bad-mouthing her and gets irritated. Fushimi looks down and asks Karasuma how he feels about her after everything she has put him through. Karasuma remains silent for a moment as he considers Fushimi's question. Karasuma admits he isn't perfect and that things do bother him, but he is thankful because the situation helped him realize how much he loves to draw. Karasuma tells Fushimi that he wants to see more of her talking happily about the things she loves. Fushimi thanks Karasuma and tells him that she feels the same way about him. Karasuma and Fushimi stand in the hallway and a handshake to seal their new agreement. Shijo watches from around the corner as Karasuma and Fushimi conclude their talk with a handshake. Shijo cries with joy while frantically sketching in her notebook, thinking that even though she didn't hear them directly, she understands that the two have finally their true feelings. Shijo watches Karasuma and Fushimi smile at each other, and her heart begins to throb at the sight. Shijo sits alone on the floor, clutching her chest, wondering if this level of excitement is actually dangerous for her health. The school day begins to wind down as the sun moves across the sky over the building. Fushimi walks back toward the clubroom looking anxious, unsure of what she should say to the others when she returns. Karasuma tells Fushimi to leave the talking to him and reveals his plan to offer canned drinks as a tribute before reaching for the clubroom door. Shijo sits smugly on the sofa with a hot drink and welcomes them back, commenting on how long they were gone. Karasuma and Fushimi stand together in silence, looking slightly overwhelmed by Shijo's confident attitude. Shijo leans in and whispers to Karasuma that no excuses are needed because she already understands everything that happened. Despite her confident claims, Shijo panics internally because she actually couldn't hear a single word of their conversation. Fushimi arrives home later that evening and announces her return as she takes off her school shoes in the entryway. Fushimi lies back on her bed in comfortable clothes and thinks about what a blissful day she just had. Fushimi hugs a shark plushie and wonders how to repay Shijo for her kindness, remembering how Shijo refused to accept cash as a thank you. Fushimi considers bringing a different kind of gift instead, just as her phone begins to buzz loudly on the bed beside her. Fushimi is stunned to see that Karasuma has started a group chat with her and Shijo, sending a friendly greeting to the group. Fushimi is thrilled to find herself in a group chat with the art club members, realizing she finally has Shijo's personal contact information. Fushimi rolls around on her bed in pure excitement, feeling deeply grateful to Karasuma for forming the support alliance. Fushimi hesitates to send a message because she doesn't want to distract Shijo from her work, but her phone suddenly begins to buzz. Fushimi is shocked to see an incoming voice call from the group chat and panics at the suddenness of it. Fushimi feels like her heart isn't ready for a call, but she decides it's too valuable a chance to miss. Before she can answer, she accidentally ends the call. The call ends abruptly, leaving Fushimi confused until Shijo sends a series of messages apologizing for the mistake. Fushimi finds Shijo's clumsy tech skills adorable. Fushimi lies on her bed and smiles at her phone, thinking that Shijo is exactly as cute as she imagined. Fushimi decides to frame the drawing Shijo gave her and send a photo of it to the group as a proper thank you. Fushimi places the framed sketch on her desk, declaring that it will now become a family treasure. Fushimi feels incredibly lucky to have been drawn by Shijo and turns her attention to the drawing Karasuma made for her. Fushimi picks up Karasuma's sketch and looks closely at the detail he put into drawing her. Fushimi sits on her bed and decides that Karasuma's work is actually amazing, typing out a message to the group chat to say so. Fushimi sends a photo to the chat showing both Shijo's and Karasuma's framed drawings displayed prominently on her desk. Karasuma sees the photo while sitting in his kitchen and grows flustered, wishing Fushimi hadn't put his drawing right next to a masterpiece from Shijo. Fushimi stands at home in her loungewear, wearing glasses and a hoodie while holding her shark plushie. Karasuma looks at Fushimi's phone and remarks on the impressive number of accounts she manages. Fushimi replies that having several is quite convenient. Fushimi looks away and asks Karasuma not to peek at the contents of those accounts. Karasuma quickly apologizes for looking. Karasuma catches a glimpse of an anonymous girl persona account and wonders if it is that specific kind of profile. Fushimi is filled with dread, thinking she would die of embarrassment if he saw the account where she rambles about her delusions. Fushimi turns to Karasuma and asks him why he does not try to draw his own manga. Karasuma pauses to consider her question while Fushimi watches him. Karasuma admits he has not given the idea much thought, though he would like to read manga. He starts to explain that while it interests him, there are other factors at play. Fushimi notes that since he is the apprentice of the famous mangaka Shishiju Renji, it seems like a waste to only focus on drawing techniques. Karasuma concedes that she makes a good point. Karasuma thinks about how much time and hard work it takes to master composition, poses, and story creation. He notes that he would have to come up with an original plot as well. Fushimi assumes the task might be too difficult for him, but Karasuma confidently declares that he will take on the challenge for that very reason. The next day arrives at the school. Shijo starts to comment on Karasuma's sudden request. Karasuma asks Shijo to teach him the ways of drawing manga. Shijo agrees, but notes that he is the only person who would ever beg her for lessons with such a motivation. Shijo asks if there is a specific subject he wants to draw, and Karasuma explains he wants to convey a message of anger at society. Shijo is surprised that his internal thoughts are so complex. Shijo instructs him to draw a 4-page warm-up about a topic he likes, similar to short comics found on social media. Karasuma prepares to start while Shijo watches him. Shijo suggests he focus on a scenario or character he enjoys. Karasuma looks back and asks her what she thinks of a specific theme he has in mind. Shijo suggests that Karasuma draw a story about a gal who is kind to an otaku. Karasuma admits he likes the trope, but worries that it is already way too overdone. Shijo tells him that repeating themes shouldn't matter because more content is always better, and she adds that a story from his perspective would feel different. Shijo claims that Karasuma has personal experience to draw from and declares the topic decided, telling him to get to work immediately. Shijo sets a deadline for Karasuma to finish the draft by the end of the day, explaining that manga is usually made under extremely tight schedules. Shijo tells Karasuma to show her his love through his drawing. Karasuma looks intimidated by the request. Later in class, Karasuma thinks about how he hasn't even sorted through his own feelings yet as the school bell rings. Karasuma looks across the classroom at Fushimi while she sits quietly and other students talk around her. Karasuma begins to write in his notebook, reflecting on a memory he has from that very room. Karasuma thinks of Fushimi as a cool and beautiful classmate who rarely speaks, leaving everyone in the dark about what she is actually thinking. He recalls a day when they bumped into each other, causing Fushimi's phone to slide across the floor and allowing him to see her screen by accident. Karasuma discovered that Fushimi had a secret social media account where she posted enthusiastically about her favorite manga series. Fushimi cornered Karasuma and threatened him to never speak of the account to anyone. Karasuma agreed in a panic as she started to walk away. Karasuma stopped her and showed her his own phone, revealing that he was actually one of her followers. The two began spending time together on the school roof, excitedly discussing the latest episodes and the quality of the anime adaptation. Karasuma reflects on the fact that he is the only one who knows about Fushimi's secret side as she continues to talk about the opening and ending themes. Karasuma watches Fushimi and thinks about how her quiet, beautiful exterior hides the fact that she is an even bigger otaku than him and can speak very quickly when excited. Karasuma recalls Fushimi looking happy and content as she discussed her interests. Karasuma works on his drawings and thinks about how cute Fushimi is when she puts so much energy into talking about the things she loves. Karasuma manages to come up with a story draft, but he starts to feel uneasy about the contents of his work. Karasuma gets flustered and crumples his draft, deciding it is far too embarrassing to show Shijo since it is based entirely on his own real-life experiences. Karasuma tosses the crumpled draft into a trash can and tells himself that he just wasted his time and cannot even draw a proper draft. Fushimi stops Karasuma in the school hallway as he is leaving for the day. Karasuma is horrified to see that Fushimi is holding the exact piece of paper he just threw in the trash. Karasuma trembles and stammers as he asks Fushimi why she has the draft he discarded. Karasuma panics and apologizes, certain that Fushimi will hate him for what he wrote, but she firmly tells him not to throw the draft away. Karasuma looks at Fushimi in silence, trying to process what she just said. Fushimi reminds Karasuma that he previously told her he wanted to see her talking about what she enjoys. Fushimi tells Karasuma that she now wants to see more of the story and find out what happens next to the characters. Fushimi tells Karasuma to take responsibility and show her the rest of the story through his drawings. Shijo reads Karasuma's finished manga and excitedly praises it, telling him that he successfully showed her the love she was looking for. Karasuma expresses doubt about his ability to turn his ideas into a manga, but Shijo dismisses his concerns. She tells him that technical skills come with experience and that as long as he has love for the work, any other problem is trivial. Shijo begins drawing rapidly while explaining the basics of paneling. She describes how to divide a page to avoid confusion and how to set the proper tempo leading up to a key moment like a smile panel. Karasuma is amazed to see his work transform into a real manga. Shijo privately regrets showing off her professional skills directly in front of Fushimi. Fushimi becomes flustered and asks Karasuma to change the character design so it looks less like her. Karasuma stammers that he wasn't intentionally depicting her and was simply drawing his ideal girl. Fushimi suggests making the character's legs thinner, but Karasuma argues that the current design is a key part of her charm. Shijo watches their bickering with a neutral expression. Shijo grows increasingly uneasy as she watches Karasuma and Fushimi argue over the art details again. The school day continues in the classroom, but Shijo is distracted by a persistent sense of unease. A classmate asks Shijo what is wrong. Shijo admits to herself that while she saved the club from disbandment and is keeping an eye on the other two, she still feels like something is off. The girl tells Shijo she can talk to her if something is worrying her. Shijo asks if her feelings are obvious, and the girl confirms they are comically clear on her face. The classmate wonders if things did not go well with Fushimi, but Shijo frantically denies the suggestion. Shijo explains that things actually went too well, noting that Karasuma was encouraged by Fushimi and decided to start drawing his own manga. Shijo confesses that she feels like she is overlooking something important. Her classmate finds Shijo's continued worry to be quite concerning. A blonde girl sitting nearby scoffs loudly at the conversation. The blonde girl decides she cannot ignore the situation. She is offended that someone in the school wanting to draw manga ignored her and chose to become Shijo's apprentice instead. The girl glares in Shijo's direction and wonders how much longer she is going to be made to look foolish. Shijo remains lost in her own thoughts as she considers the current situation. Karasuma focuses on his work while Fushimi watches him and wonders what kind of story he is creating. Karasuma tosses a piece of paper into the bin, much to Fushimi's surprise. Fushimi retrieves the discarded draft and decides to take a look at it despite her hesitation. Fushimi blushes intensely as she reads through the crumpled manga pages. Shijo looks at Karasuma's draft on her phone and feels excited about the potential of his artwork. Shijo makes coffee while thinking that Karasuma has the natural talent of a protagonist for creating such a draft on his first try. Shijo admits to herself that she gets a strange feeling whenever she watches Karasuma and Fushimi together. Shijo drinks her coffee by the window and wonders if the current situation is really okay. Fushimi slams the door open and shouts for Shijo, startling her so much that she spills some of her drink. Fushimi reports that there is a major problem concerning Karasuma. Fushimi announces that Karasuma has been kidnapped, leaving Shijo completely stunned. Fushimi explains that upperclassmen burst into the room after a loud laugh and took Karasuma away before she could react. Fushimi describes the moment Karasuma was bound with ropes and carried off by the intruders. Shijo questions if Fushimi was just daydreaming a manga plot, but Fushimi insists she pinched herself to make sure it was real. Shijo admits she has no idea where Karasuma was taken and is worried because he isn't picking up his phone. Fushimi mentions that Umiya-senpai might have a lead, which shocks Shijo. Umiya-senpai suggests via text that if a loud laugh was heard, they should check the art room. Fushimi is amazed that the senpai narrowed the location down based on such a small detail. Fushimi notes that the art room is right next to theirs as they approach the door. Shijo wonders who would pull such a stunt, but a voice from inside tells the witch she did well to come. They enter the room to find a girl waiting for them with Karasuma. The girl tells the newcomers that she is about to show them something special. The girl stands over Karasuma, who is tied up with thick ropes. She announces that she will make Fushimi's cute servant surrender to her completely. Shijo is stunned into silence by the sight of Karasuma bound to a chair in the middle of the room. Fushimi whispers about how scandalous the situation looks. This causes the girl to blush and frantically scream that she isn't doing anything inappropriate. The girl claims her goal is to save Karasuma from the witch's brainwashing. She insists she was only trying to have a conversation with him. It turns out the girl was trying to recruit Karasuma with better employment terms like double pay and flexible hours. Karasuma begs for rescue, admitting he is struggling not to give in to her pleasant offers. Shijo finally realizes who the girl is. Shijo identifies the girl as Takarazuka Alisa, a perfect student from a good family who excels in everything from sports to art. She is a textbook example of a wealthy lady. Shijo is surprised to learn Alisa is as popular as she is within the school. Fushimi notes Alisa's clear fixation on Karasuma while Shijo tries to process the girl's reputation. Watching Alisa act so refined, Shijo decides she is the perfect Aju-sama rival heroine. She finds the whole scenario incredibly interesting for a manga plot. A sudden realization washes over Shijo as she stares at the scene. Shijo's instincts as a mangaka flare up, revealing the cause of her earlier eerie feeling. She understands exactly what role Alisa plays in the narrative. Shijo concludes that for the flames of love to burn bright, an obstacle must exist to keep the lovers apart. She looks at the trio and sees the perfect dramatic conflict for her work. Shijo reflects on how things were going too smoothly between Karasuma and Fushimi lately, which made a new conflict necessary for the story. Excited by the prospect of more drama, Shijo asks Alisa about her relationship with the boy and tells her to stop playing dumb. Alisa points a finger and states that her real connection is actually with Shijo Kimichi, much to Shijo's shock. Shijo is baffled as Alisa accuses her of feigning ignorance and asks if she has really forgotten their history together. Alisa recalls how Shijo always ranked above her in art exhibitions during middle school and acted like a mysterious center of attention. Alisa claims Shijo ignored her existence just to disgrace her, but Shijo apologizes and admits she genuinely never noticed her. Alisa yells that they were even in the same class and laments that her own uniqueness is fading because of the constant comparisons. Karasuma notes that the situation sounds terrible. Alisa complains that people no longer respect her and instead mock her noble behavior. Shijo wonders if she is truly the one to blame for this. Shijo realizes that Alisa is her rival and decides that the development involving the art club and Karasuma is a good turn of events. Fushimi and Alisa both grab for the boy's arms. Shijo interrupts the squabble to ask why Alisa is so fixated on the boy specifically. Alisa prepares to give her reason. Alisa reveals that her primary goal was to read the high-effort manga draft that Karasuma created. The mention of the draft leaves both Shijo and Fushimi completely blindsided and speechless. Alisa explains that she sensed intense passion in the draft and didn't want such talent to be wasted as a servant to the witch. Alisa reveals her plan to bring Karasuma into the manga research club, a development that leaves Shijo wide-eyed. Alisa explains that she became the head of the manga club after starting school and shows off her successful online works. She urges Karasuma to join her side so she can teach him the fundamentals of manga. The group stands in an awkward, heavy silence after Alisa's pitch. Shijo, Fushimi, and Karasuma all stare back with blank, unimpressed expressions. Shijo mumbles defensively, insisting she doesn't view manga as an inferior form of art. She warns Alisa that she shouldn't try to challenge her through manga. Karasuma, still tied to the chair, asks if he can just leave since he isn't interested in the club. Shijo worries that the power balance is so broken it won't make for a good narrative obstacle. Karasuma explains he doesn't want to bother his master and needs to go prepare her food soon. Fushimi demands to be fed, leaving Alisa shocked that he chose Shijo over her. Alisa argues that manga isn't just about drawing skills and admits she could never rival Shijo in fine arts. Karasuma remains skeptical about her point. Shijo tells her rival that if she wants to be an obstacle to love, she needs what it takes to surpass Love Chronicle. Alisa is confused while Shijo notes they are talking on different scales. Alisa boldly declares that she will make a work that easily surpasses Love Chronicle. Shijo and Fushimi watch her outburst with wide eyes. Shijo critiques the story of Love Chronicle, calling it a mess despite the cute characters. Fushimi stands in a dark, menacing shadow as Shijo agrees with her own harsh assessment. Shijo continues her rant, claiming the author is coasting on fame and adding new characters just to avoid being axed. She expresses a wish for better effort in every chapter. Fushimi asks menacingly if Shijo can actually draw something better. Alisa ignores the dark mood and talks about her plan to submit a manuscript to a competition and sell 1 million volumes. Alisa laughs and tells Karasuma he should come by her side to learn a lot. Karasuma looks away, clearly not convinced by her offer. Shijo looks down thoughtfully and agrees that the boy needs to be in an environment that allows him to grow. Shijo looms over Alisa and challenges her to see who can make the most interesting manga. She declares that they will also apply for the prize and asks if Alisa accepts the challenge. Alisa enthusiastically accepts the challenge, much to the alarm of Karasuma. He thinks Alisa has no humanity in her heart and warns her that it is a trap set by the witch. Karasuma tells Shijo she is being way too childish about the whole situation. Shijo calmly looks away and announces that she won't be the one drawing their entry. Shijo puts her hand on Karasuma's shoulder and announces that her cute servant will be the one to draw the manga. Karasuma is left in total shock, unable to believe what he just heard. Shijo looks on with a smug grin. The afternoon sun hangs over the school building. Back in their clubroom, Karasuma yells at Shijo for accepting the unnecessary competition. Shijo apologizes but admits she just couldn't back down after being instigated like that. Karasuma slumps on a stool and worries that he can't possibly draw a publishable manga. Shijo lounged on the sofa and promises to help him. Shijo thinks to herself that while the situation was a bit forced, it would be better if the new girl becomes Karasuma's rival instead of hers. Shijo imagines Alisa becoming overwhelmed with conflicting feelings for Karasuma once she sees the high amount of effort he puts into his work. Shijo tells Karasuma she will do the best she can to support him, even if she doesn't know how far they will manage to go. Karasuma looks determined and says he can't just be silent and do nothing after what Alisa said about Love Chronicle. Shijo is surprised by his sudden resolve. Shijo laughs and tells Karasuma he really does look like a manga character. Karasuma admits that being suddenly kidnapped really surprised him, though he is becoming used to expecting weird things at school. Shijo closes her eyes and admits that the reality of everything that happened still hasn't quite sunk in for her yet. Shijo notices Karasuma's deadpan expression and asks what that face is for. Karasuma holds up a manga draft and points to a specific section asking Shijo what its purpose is. Shijo explains the importance of keeping pacing in mind. She tells him to use the previous page for preparation and then increase the tempo with a detailed panel to create a run up to the next page. Shijo dramatically presents a drawing declaring it the perfect shot for an extra cute girl. She explains that since Love Chronicle is a rom-com, the competition boils down to making the female characters as cute as possible. Karasuma thanks her for the lesson. Yuji-sensei notices Karasuma's enthusiasm and asks if he has finally developed a real interest in manga. Karasuma hesitates to explain the full situation. Yuji-sensei is completely stunned upon learning that Karasuma is going to compete for a manga prize. Yuji-sensei despairs over the fact that both clubs he supervises are now at war with each other. Shijo finds the drama fitting for a manga plot, but Yuji-sensei thinks her brain is entirely consumed by fiction at this point. Karasuma asks Shijo why she didn't just join the manga club from the start. Yuji-sensei confirms that supervising both clubs is a lot of responsibility. Shijo says her reasoning is obvious. Shijo explains that she wouldn't have been able to keep her identity secret for long in the manga club. Yuji-sensei warns Karasuma that Alisa is a very formidable opponent. Shijo wonders why Yuji-sensei never mentioned Alisa before, but the teacher snaps that he told her many times. He points out she only remembers things that catch her attention. Shijo considers Alisa's background as a skilled artist who only picked up manga in high school. She notes the girl's impressive tenacity and ability to maintain perfect grades. Shijo reviews Alisa's work and finds her skill level beyond reproach, thinking she was already ready for publication. Karasuma points out he can act as a spy since he sees Alisa's manuscripts. Yuji-sensei warns that Alisa cannot be defeated with quick training, but Karasuma remains determined. He stares ahead, refusing to accept defeat. Karasuma stands tall and announces that he is Shishiju-sensei's apprentice. Shijo watches him with a surprised expression. Karasuma continues by saying he won't lose to anyone who fails to see the greatness of Love Chronicle. Shijo is visibly moved by his dedication to her work. Karasuma feels the weight of Fushimi's expectations and vows to deliver a high-quality manga. Shijo tells him to show everyone the strength of his love. Yuji-sensei reflects on how Shijo is a total manga fanatic who cares for nothing else. Karasuma interprets her excitement as a sign of deep master-disciple affection. Shijo smiles happily, which surprises Yuji-sensei. He realizes he has never seen her look quite like that before. Yuji-sensei points out that the deadline is approaching fast. Karasuma calculates that if he completes 2 pages every day for the next 2 weeks, he should be able to finish on time. Karasuma looks completely exhausted and admits he can't go on. He finds drawing even a single page a day to be an incredibly painful and difficult task. Shijo suddenly gets an idea and suggests that Karasuma should get some encouragement from his rival. She notes that Alisa is right in the room next door. Shijo shoves Karasuma out the door, telling him to go visit the other club for a change of pace. Karasuma protests that they are currently in a competition, but he is forced out anyway. Karasuma peeks into the next room and is immediately spotted. Fushimi asks if he has come to spy on them. Shijo watches from the hallway and feels satisfied that something interesting is finally happening. She hopes that a sprout of love might grow between them. Fushimi serves Karasuma a drink while they discuss the situation. Karasuma blames his master for the mess while Fushimi blames Alisa. She asks him if his manga drawing is going well, and he admits it is a slow process. Karasuma admits he came to the room to escape reality for a bit and asks if Alisa is there. Fushimi says she will arrive soon and mentions that Alisa is busy helping out with many other school committees. Fushimi explains that Alisa often ends up overwhelmed because she accepts everyone's requests as part of her noble duty. Karasuma finds it easy to imagine her being that overworked. Karasuma expresses concern about whether Alisa will even manage to finish her own manuscript. Fushimi admits she is worried too, but tries to remain optimistic. Fushimi tells Karasuma that Alisa is a kind person who will persevere until the end even if she is easy to misunderstand. Karasuma notes how much confidence Fushimi has in her. Fushimi explains that Alisa genuinely thought she was saving Karasuma from a witch when she kidnapped him. Karasuma realizes her intentions were good, although Fushimi notes Alisa tends to go wild whenever Shijo is involved. Fushimi suggests that Alisa really just wants to be friends with Karasuma. She explains that most people in manga clubs don't actually draw, so Alisa was genuinely happy to see his draft. A shadow falls over the table as a voice tells Karasuma that he has been talking a bit too much. Alisa arrives with her bags and asks Karasuma what he wants. She tells him he will be warmly received if he wants to surrender, but she won't accept any excuses about missing the deadline just because he is a beginner. Karasuma feels the pressure while looking at his unfinished work. Alisa states that her main goal is to win the prize and see the face the witch makes after losing. She tells Karasuma she won't be holding anything back. Karasuma asks Alisa if she's so fixated on his master because she actually wants to be friends with her. Alisa reacts with an immediate flustered denial. Alisa insists that she has absolutely no intention of ever getting along with Shijo. Alisa recalls an art exhibition where she won a semi-grand prize, but admits she has always struggled to put up with Shijo. Memories show Alisa and Shijo both attending the same art shows as younger students, with Shijo often nearby as Alisa displayed her award-winning works. Alisa holds her prize trophy and watches from a distance as Shijo walks away seemingly indifferent to the surroundings. Alisa remembers being struck by Shijo's eyes, which seem to ignore the mundane world and reveal the unwavering confidence of an extraordinary person. Alisa complains that Shijo has ignored her until now but believes her manga will force the witch to finally acknowledge her as a rival. Alisa declares she will show Shijo the real reason why she is here. Karasuma watches her with a surprised look. Fushimi realizes Alisa truly wants to be friends with Shijo. Karasuma questions if Alisa is fixated on her to the point of refusing his earlier invitation just to stay with her. Karasuma admits Alisa might have a point. Alisa notes she has many complex thoughts regarding the master. Karasuma holds up his pen and expresses confidence that Shijo will understand his thoughts once she finally reads his manga. Alisa smiles and notes that Karasuma spoke well as the sun shines over the school building. The whole group gathers around the table with their manuscripts. Alisa declares that from now on they will let their manga do the talking. Fushimi serves Alisa a cup of tea. Alisa thanks her, noting her assistant's attentiveness. Alisa tastes the tea and recognizes the specific tea leaves she was told about. Shijo complains that she is dying of hunger and asks if the food will be much longer. Karasuma says it is almost done while he cooks. Shijo thinks the meat is delicious pork, but Karasuma corrects her and says it is actually beef. Yuji-sensei decides to begin the evaluation meeting to satisfy the impatient students. Yuji-sensei establishes himself as the judge and starts with Alisa's work. Alisa remains confident that her skill level is far superior. Alisa fidgets nervously while the others sit in silence and examine her manuscript. Shijo points out that having work read in person is always a nerve-wracking experience. Alisa snaps at her to just get on with reading the manuscript. Karasuma is stunned by the professional quality of the completed manuscript. Karasuma notes the story has an eccentric setting and a well-developed protagonist focused on revenge. He finds the dark hero narrative to be very effective. Fushimi notes that the heroine captures current trends perfectly. She concludes that Alisa clearly did her research despite her bad taste in manga. Yuji-sensei praises the manuscript for its high quality and the passion it conveys. Shijo admits there is nothing she can criticize about it as an entry. Alisa proudly declares her manga is superior to a simple hobby and asks if Shijo finally acknowledges her talent. Alisa believes this manga will be her ticket to becoming a professional. She wants to show Shijo that she isn't the only extraordinary individual. Shijo acknowledges that the manuscript is certainly well made. Shijo delivers a harsh critique, saying the work is technically perfect for a model student but lacks any sign of the creator's love. Alisa reacts with shock. Shijo prepares to point out specific flaws in the manuscript. Shijo explains that while the universe is fun, it's hard to feel immersed or get a sense of danger. Fushimi listens with a worried expression. Shijo critiques the characters as bland and feels like they were superficially copied from elsewhere. Alisa is shocked by the accuracy of the feedback. Alisa feels like a veteran mangaka is lecturing her. She wonders if Shijo possesses the eyes of a true genius. Shijo notes the work is well written enough to earn a prize. Alisa is amazed by Shijo's overwhelming talent. Shijo asks Alisa if she really thinks her work can surpass Love Chronicle. Alisa stares ahead with wide, sweating eyes as the pressure mounts. Shijo suggests that Alisa should read Karasuma's manuscript, Play Me Your Music. Alistair reads the story about a protagonist in despair who is noticed by a genius musician girl. She notes the art lacks experience but is not bad. Alistair finds the plot development erratic and impossible to predict. Karasuma looks on nervously from across the table. Alistair gets drawn into the story because the characters' feelings are so authentic. She decides it feels more like a personal love letter than a standard manga. Alistair realizes that for Shijo technique is trivial compared to heart. She finally understands why her own work was called befitting of a mere model student. Alistair is left wondering who Karasuma really is to have caught Shijo's attention so completely. Alistair sees a panel in the manga showing a girl with a very genuine and happy smile. Alistair recognizes the expression in the drawing as one she made herself. She stands frozen while holding the manuscript. Alistair continues to study the manuscript in silence while Karasuma and Shijo watch her carefully. Alistair wonders if the manga isn't just mimicking the style of a love letter, but is actually a genuine one. Fushimi thanks Karasuma for the manga. Karasuma looks happy while Alistair and Shijo remain lost in thought. Shijo claims she lacks the love required to move hearts, but Alistair realizes she simply wasn't able to see the love present in her own technical skill. Alistair reflects on how she only cared about being acknowledged and focused entirely on popular trends and technique. She admits her own feelings weren't really in her work. Shijo disagrees, arguing that a work with so much care put into it couldn't possibly be made without love. She bets that Alistair simply hasn't noticed it herself yet. Shijo encourages Alistair to show more of her love in her next work. Alistair is left wide-eyed and stunned by Shijo's unexpected words of encouragement. A quiet moment passes between Alistair and Shijo in the clubroom. A small, genuine smile forms on Alistair's face. Yuji-sensei takes a broader view and decides that Alistair's work is definitely deserving of the win. Shijo agrees with his assessment. Yuji-sensei notes that while Karasuma's work is passionate, it is far too niche and poorly drawn compared to Alistair's professional level completion. He says no one would ignore a high schooler with Alistair's skill. Shijo names Alistair the winner of the competition. She tells her that, as promised, she is free to use Karasuma's body however she likes, suggesting she could even boil or roast him. Alistair surprises both Shijo and Karasuma by stating that she won't be needing the boy as a subordinate after all. Alistair admits that although she wanted to take him, she is now convinced Shijo is the best possible master for Karasuma. She acknowledges that his ability to draw such a manga came from studying under Shijo. Alistair declares that this wasn't the kind of victory she was looking for. She warns the clan of the witch to be prepared because she will completely destroy them next time. Alice's phone buzzes with a call from her editor forcing her to leave the room. She tells the others to keep developing their rivalry in her absence. Shijo notes that Alice is quite disorganized. Karasuma sobs to Fushimi, apologizing for failing their plan to prove the greatness of Love Chronicle. Fushimi consoles him by saying he did his best. Alice pauses to address the group. She admits she noticed how deeply Love Chronicle has influenced Karasuma and Fushimi. Alice bows and apologizes for her earlier rude comments. She explains that she was just upset and admits it was wrong to insult the series in front of such dedicated fans. Alice reveals the truth that she is actually a huge fan of Shishiju-sensei's work. Fushimi is confused since Alice was just trash-talking it, but Alice claims there is a deep reason behind her behavior. Alice brings up the series' gorgeous bloodlines, which was the sensei's first work. She explains it was a serious gag manga about wealthy ladies fighting for their aesthetics. Alice calls the manga her Bible and says the stubborn characters inspired her to start drawing in the first place. Alice starts rambling about how she thinks the sensei draws her current series lazily out of habit. She admits she only spoke out because she wants to see the author put in real effort again. Karasuma defends the series, refusing to agree that it is drawn without passion, especially the recent volumes. Alice realizes she might have overthought her position. Later, Shijo sits on her sofa as her editor calls. She realizes she will likely be the judge for the competition and decides she needs to tell the boy to withdraw his application. Shijo comes up with a theory after reading Karasuma's work. She suspects he never intended to publish it and feels embarrassed realizing the manga has already reached its intended audience. Shijo reflects on Karasuma's actions while he cooks for her. She realizes her perspective as a writer blinded her to things that became obvious once they were presented in a manga format. Shijo thinks back on her eerie feelings regarding her friends. She wonders if her theory explains the strange atmosphere between them. Blushing on her couch, Shijo concludes that it is now a certainty that she is the heroine of the story. Shijo further concludes that she is certainly the main heroine of this story. Shijo considers Karasuma's efforts and realizes that his recent actions are a definitive move expected of a heroine. Fushimi is shocked to learn that Alisa is withdrawing her submission from the manga contest. Alisa tells Fushimi not to overreact, explaining that she is simply postponing her entry for now. Fushimi protests because she loved the manga regardless of Shijo's harsh critique. Alisa insists she isn't throwing the work away but believes it requires revisions. Alisa admits that Shijo's feedback during the meeting made her realize which parts of her story need to be fleshed out. She plans to fix those sections before applying for the next competition. Alisa vows to keep the concept of love in mind for her next project. Yuji-sensei looks over at her after hearing her resolve. Yuji-sensei suggests that making many different works is better for experience, though he admits tweaking a current project is also fine. Fushimi asks if Alisa is truly okay with her decision. Yuji-sensei chokes on his drink upon remembering that Shishiju-sensei will be the judge this time. He points out that Alisa worked hard specifically to have her work read by the sensei. Alisa explains that since the sensei is judging, she refuses to submit a work she is unsatisfied with. Alisa adds that she realized something new after listening to Shijo's advice. Alisa boldly declares that she will have many more opportunities to have the sensei read her work once she creates something that surpasses Love Chronicle. Yuji-sensei and Fushimi stare at Alisa with completely exhausted expressions. Fushimi is relieved to see that Alisa hasn't lost her spirit. Alisa accuses her of making fun of her, but Fushimi insists she isn't. Fushimi notes that most people would scoff and think Alisa is crazy after hearing her idea. Fushimi asks Alisa if she is determined to reach her goal without giving up. Alisa proudly declares that it is a given since she never goes back on her word. Fushimi promises to root for Alisa even if she fails, which makes Alisa flustered and demand that her friend believe in her success. Yuji-sensei interrupts to call Alisa's name. Yuji-sensei is moved to tears and admits he completely underestimated Alisa's effort. He asks to be allowed to support her journey as well. Yuji-sensei notes that since drawing is just a hobby, he didn't want it to negatively impact Alisa's studies. Alisa remains confident that it won't be a problem for her. The conversation shifts to surpassing Shishiju-sensei. Fushimi clarifies that she doesn't actually harbor any bad feelings toward the famous author. Fushimi is stunned to hear that Karasuma is also planning to withdraw from the competition. Karasuma explains that he can't enter because his master is the one who will be judging all the submissions. Fushimi suggests that Karasuma should find a different contest to enter. Karasuma thinks that would still be unfair and decides to just sit this one out, reflecting on Shijo's earlier remarks. Fushimi admits she really wanted Karasuma to compete so he could get a good evaluation and shut Alisa up. Alisa is seen in the background eating a snack while looking annoyed. Karasuma tells Fushimi that he is okay with the current situation. He points out that he didn't start drawing just to win prizes. Karasuma asks Fushimi if she would truly be comfortable with a bunch of strangers reading the manga he made. The question causes Fushimi to stop and blush intensely as the weight of the situation hits her. Fushimi starts to tremble and confesses that while it would be extremely embarrassing, she hates the idea of him throwing away such a great manga. Karasuma stands by his choice to withdraw. Fushimi laments that it feels like a waste for them to be the only ones who read it after all his hard work. Karasuma disagrees with her assessment. Karasuma smiles and tells Fushimi that being able to see her smile was a big enough reward for his efforts. Fushimi is left speechless by his words as they continue their walk. Fushimi is visibly startled by Karasuma's directness and honesty. Fushimi wonders how Karasuma can say such embarrassing things without any shame. She concludes that his personality makes him perfectly suited for his role as a mangaka, while Karasuma offers a quick apology. Alisa mentions that she has noticed Fushimi always calls her by a specific title. She asks if she can stop doing that, but Fushimi gives a blunt refusal. Shijo sits on her couch and struggles to accept her new realization that she has become the heroine. She admits she completely underestimated Karasuma's natural protagonist energy. Shijo reviews the past events and realizes her behavior was exactly how a main heroine would act. She thinks about how their master-disciple relationship allowed them to get closer under the guise of supporting his love life. Shijo remains deep in thought, her expression reflecting her inner turmoil over her feelings. Shijo finally understands that the strange excitement and eerie sensations she experienced were actually love the entire time. Shijo sits alone at her desk in the quiet classroom, staring blankly ahead. Alisa bursts into the room and demands to know how much longer Shijo intends to sit there daydreaming. Alisa informs Shijo that physical education class is starting and everyone else has already vacated the classroom. Shijo apologizes and claims she was just lost in thought. Alisa asks if there is something wrong with Shijo, noting that she seems far less energetic than usual. Shijo avoids eye contact while Alisa observes her behavior. Alisa points out that Shijo's mouth is twisting into a strange cryptic shape. She grabs Shijo and declares she won't let her escape the lesson, insisting that a healthy body leads to a healthy mind. Alisa vows to take Shijo's defeated expression and whip it back into proper shape. During the PE lesson, Alisa leads the group in a run around the track while Shijo struggles to keep up and falls behind the other students. Shijo collapses onto the ground in total exhaustion after the run. She pants heavily and asks if they just ran a half marathon, but Alisa points out they didn't even cover more than 100 meters. Alisa tells Shijo that it would make things difficult for her if Shijo can't keep it together, as it would impact her own value as a rival. Shijo can only offer a weak response to the lecture. Shijo thinks about having a loser's expression and asks for forgiveness for losing her energy momentarily. She reflects on finally finding the perfect manga content just a hair's breadth away. Alisa asks how long Shijo intends to stay on the ground. Shijo admits she literally cannot move, prompting Alisa to pull out her phone and state she has no other choice but to call for help. Alisa decides to have the disciple retrieve her. Karasuma arrives and picks Shijo up for a piggyback ride, leaving her completely stunned and flustered as she clings to him. Shijo thinks to herself that everyone knows this kind of gesture makes a maiden's heart go crazy. She tells Karasuma that he is doing this to a maiden. Shijo understands now that her racing heart is what love feels like. Karasuma notices her heavy breathing and asks if she overexerted herself during the run, but she claims building stamina is part of her job. Shijo tries to calm her heart by telling herself that Karasuma has no ulterior motives. She convinces herself he is just taking care of her as a devoted disciple like always. Shijo apologizes for making Karasuma carry her. He tells her it is fine since she often has trouble moving on her own, but she warns him not to treat her like a sloth. Shijo believes Karasuma will only be able to maintain his current attitude for a while before he eventually notices his own true feelings for her. Shijo starts viewing Karasuma as a cute little animal because he is so active and caring toward people. Her sudden reaction startles him while he continues to carry her. Karasuma heads off to his afternoon classes and tells Shijo to have a proper lunch so she doesn't get malnourished. Shijo notes that he stays by her side because he understands her nature. Shijo smiles to herself while wondering if the intense feeling she is currently experiencing is what extreme happiness feels like. Shijo ponders her situation while having a drink. She realizes that given her new understanding of her feelings, Fushimi now clearly becomes a problem for her. Shijo recalls how she has been helping Karasuma with his love for Fushimi up until now. She notes that he trusted her as a master and that he and Fushimi actually seem to have a very good vibe between them. Shijo clenches her fist and wonders if all her efforts to help Karasuma have simply backfired on her. She finds herself completely unsure of what she should even do now. Shijo declares that she is the main heroine after all and decides to let whatever happens happen. She suddenly realizes how late it has already become. Shijo continues to work at her desk surrounded by crumpled paper. She tells herself that worrying won't help and notes that there isn't much time left until the deadline. Determined, Shijo holds her pen and feels that the perfect manga content is just within her reach. Night has fallen over the school building. Shijo rests on her sofa at home, looking exhausted as she checks the time. The school building stands still under the daylight. Drafts, a pen, and an eraser lie scattered across a desk along with several balls of discarded paper. Shijo sits quietly on her sofa, engrossed in reading over her manuscript. Frustrated, Shijo rips up her work, claiming the lines aren't right for her characters. She admits she was only projecting the chaos in her heart onto the page. Shijo slumps back on the couch, unable to see where her story is heading and wondering what she has actually accomplished before the deadline. Shijo feels that manga is all she has and fears her life would have no meaning if she couldn't draw it anymore. A sudden knock at the door breaks Shijo's train of thought as someone asks for permission to enter. Fushimi and Karasuma walk into the room. Fushimi apologizes for being away for so long and notes that it has been a while since they last met. Fushimi explains she has been learning to play music recently. Karasuma tries to praise her skills, but she tells him he has said enough and silences him. Shijo asks if she plays an instrument. Fushimi says that watching Karasuma inspired her to work hard as well. Shijo stares at her with a look of intense realization. Fushimi suggests that she might let Shijo hear her play sometime. Shijo watches them from her seat, appearing completely blindsided by the interaction. Time passes as the story moves toward its next phase. Shijo settles back into her work, focused intensely on the desk cluttered with manuscripts and coffee. Shijo laughs with delight as a wave of inspiration strikes her. She scribbles onto the page, feeling like she has finally caught the right sensation for her story. Shijo admires what she considers to be her finest work yet. She concludes that seeing someone else's love was the key, as her own feelings only serve to dull her creative thoughts. Shijo dismisses her earlier thoughts about being a main heroine. She decides that if a feeling cannot be turned into content for a manga, it has no value to her at all. Shijo looks at her tools and realizes she had forgotten that her love exists solely for the sake of manga. Shijo wipes away tears and gives a determined smile to Karasuma. She reassures him that she will continue to do her absolute best to support his love life. A bonus chapter begins at the school where students are chattering about something crazy happening in the building. Shijo and Alisa face off in a tense standoff in the middle of a hallway while classmates watch. The surrounding students gossip about the chance meeting between the two famous first years. They speculate that some long-standing link must exist between the genius artist and the elite lady. The crowd wonders if they are seeing a formal declaration of war and if the rumors about the two being rivals are actually true. Alisa greets Shijo through a window and tells her that there is something important she must say. Alisa announces her decision not to join the art club for high school. Alisa turns to walk away, warning Shijo not to mistake this for running away. She vows to take a different route and force Shijo to witness her overcoming her through pure effort. Shijo is completely baffled and asks Alisa what she is talking about. She adds a final question, asking if she is supposed to know Alisa from somewhere. Shijo walks away, apologizing if she has made Alisa angry, but admitting she has no idea what Alisa is talking about. She is too focused on trying to write down a new manga idea before she forgets it. Alisa stands in the hallway as students gossip around her. She tells herself that Shijo will eventually pay for ignoring her and vows to make her remember her name. The volume concludes with an afterward section. The author Rimukoro thanks the readers for buying the second volume of the series. He notes that the story has been focusing heavily on manga creation lately. The author compares his drawing pace to Shijo's. He notes that while the character manages 8 pages a day while attending school, he usually draws about 4 pages a day, with each page taking 3 hours. The author is seen playing a video game and insists he isn't being lazy. He claims that Shijo is simply a monster in terms of productivity. The author is shocked to hear that many real mangaka actually draw that many pages every day. He calls them all monsters and tries to hide his gaming play time from the readers. Shijo reflects on her history as a romance mangaka who never actually understood love. She recalls taking Karasuma as a disciple to search for content while supporting his love life. Shijo realizes that she herself is a heroine in this story, which finally allowed her to find the manga content she had been looking for. Shijo clutches her head at her messy desk, admitting that her own love ended up destroying her creativity. She reflects on the new path she chose as a result. A new chapter begins with Shijo wearing glasses and holding a book. She dramatically announces the start of a study session. Karasuma is surprised by the sudden proposal, noting that midterms start the following week. He admits he didn't expect such a suggestion from her. Karasuma explains he is in trouble because he was too busy drawing manga for someone else. Yuji-sensei suggests he just aim for a passing grade, and Shijo admits she's in the same boat. Karasuma points out they are in different grades and says he would rather study by himself. Shijo looks at him with annoyance and asks if he is still half asleep. Shijo explains that the studying is merely an extra benefit. She tells Karasuma that the session is actually a pretext for him to spend more time with Fushimi. Shijo claims that a study session is a classic romantic comedy trope. She imagines Karasuma and Fushimi thinking of each other while their bodies touch during tutoring. Karasuma dismisses her ideas as nothing more than manga brainrot. Shijo offers to act as a wingman since she believes Karasuma lacks the guts to invite Fushimi himself. Karasuma groans and questions if it's really okay for them to be using this particular room during the exam period, especially since the invitation was so sudden. Shijo identifies the house they will be using for their session. Shijo reveals they are using Karasuma's house for the study session. Fushimi follows her inside while Karasuma watches them looking a bit stressed. Fushimi compliments the house, calling it charming. Karasuma warns her that it's an old building and asks her to be careful while he goes to get drinks for them. Shijo leads the way into Karasuma's room and observes that it is much tidier than she anticipated. She thinks the cleanliness perfectly suits his methodical personality. Shijo notices Karasuma's heavily worn copies of Love Chronicle and a large stack of used sketchbooks. She realizes he has been taking her difficult demands very seriously all this time, making her heart skip a beat. Shijo becomes overwhelmed and clutches her head in distress. She tells herself that she shouldn't have these feelings for him because she already committed to supporting his love for someone else. Shijo pinches her cheeks to steady herself, vowing not to let Karasuma find out about her feelings. She resolves to act normally and stay consistent with her usual behavior. Shijo suddenly suggests checking under the bed since it's a common trope when entering a boy's room. Fushimi is skeptical but admits it might be expected. Fushimi asks if Shijo found anything suspicious under the bed. Shijo reports that she found nothing except proof that Karasuma is very good at cleaning. She then sits on his bed, noting how comfortable it feels. Shijo leans down and notices Karasuma's scent on the bedsheets, causing her heart to pound violently. Shijo panics and jumps back, screaming that she can't let herself fall for him. She realizes that being in his room is dangerous because every single thing there reminds her of him. Shijo clutches her chest and tries to force her heart to calm down. She fears she will lose her mind if anything else triggers her emotions. Karasuma returns to the room carrying a tray of snacks and drinks. He tells Shijo and Fushimi that everything is fine and they don't need to worry about anything. Shijo decides to study for her own grade since her material is different from Karasuma's. She expects the tutoring exchanges to happen exclusively between Karasuma and Fushimi. Karasuma and Fushimi sit side by side and focus on their respective textbooks while Shijo watches them. Shijo looks on at the pair, her face flushing as she tries to hide her mounting nerves. Shijo encourages the two of them to get closer as she continues to scribble notes in her own book. Karasuma stops writing while studying classical literature with Fushimi. Seeing how easily Fushimi seems to be progressing, Shijo decides that this is her chance to step in as a wingman. Shijo points out that Karasuma seems to be having trouble. He admits that he is struggling because he isn't good at classical literature. Shijo suggests that Fushimi should teach Karasuma, but Fushimi gives a blunt refusal. Fushimi admits that she is also having trouble understanding the material, which leaves Shijo completely baffled. Shijo is shocked that her plan for the two to bond is failing. Fushimi confesses that she was just scribbling in her book out of embarrassment because she didn't understand anything. Karasuma then reminds Shijo that she claimed to have perfect grades in the subject. Both Fushimi and Karasuma turn towards Shijo and ask her to teach them the material instead. Shijo is completely overwhelmed and her eyes swirl with confusion at the unexpected request. Shijo ends up tutoring both of them on grammar and conjugations. She finds it impossible to focus on the lesson because her thoughts are scattered and the situation feels like a manga trope from the past. Shijo feels that Karasuma is sitting way too close to her. She tries to tell herself that she is overreacting since they are often close during drawing lessons, but she struggles to remain calm. Shijo panics because Fushimi has also leaned in very close to her. While she finds Fushimi's intense stare scary, she notices that the other girl smells pleasant. Shijo groans in distress as she tries to cope with the proximity of both friends. Karasuma notices her discomfort and asks what is wrong with her. Shijo suddenly flees to the bathroom, leaving Karasuma startled by her abrupt exit. Fushimi is also exhausted and tells herself she thought she was going to die being so close to her idol. Karasuma is confused by the meaning behind their strange behavior. Shijo sits on the bathroom floor and wonders what just happened to her. Shijo tells herself to keep it together. Shijo reflects that she already decided love should only exist for her manga and feels she cannot afford to be in this state. Fushimi observes Shijo from the hallway, thinking it is amazing how her expressions change like a Mo character. Shijo decides she has to go back and assist the pair. Fushimi and Karasuma sit together at the table, continuing their conversation. Shijo peeks through the door and notices the good vibe between her friends. She considers making an excuse to go home so she doesn't get in their way, but decides to watch a little more. A girl in a hoodie appears in the hallway and asks Shijo what she is doing there. The hoodie girl labels Shijo a suspicious person, leaving Shijo completely terrified. Karasuma asks his master if she has actually been studying or just attending classes. Shijo displays her grades, showing perfect scores in humanities and failing marks in math and science. Karasuma tells her she is being way too picky. Shijo explains that she only puts effort into history and literature because they are beneficial for manga material. Fushimi is amazed that Shijo manages to get a perfect score in her specialized fields. Back in the hallway, the hoodie girl continues to call Shijo a suspicious person while Shijo panics. Shijo realizes the girl is Karasuma's little sister and desperately tries to explain that she isn't a suspicious person. Shijo sits on the floor with her scattered manga drafts and admits to herself that she definitely looks suspicious. The sister continues to stare at her, making Shijo panic about being labeled as a bad person if things don't change. Karasuma enters the hallway and asks Shijo why she is being so loud. He spots the girl in the hoodie and asks if she is home, already receiving a nod in response. Karasuma introduces the girl as his shy sister Tamari, who hides behind his arm. Fushimi offers a nervous greeting. Both Shijo and Fushimi are immediately captivated by how cute Tamari is as they watch her. Shijo notices Tamara's proximity to her brother and senses an overwhelming amount of sibling affection between them. Shijo concludes that the girl has a brother complex and tries to think of a way to get closer to her, though she briefly wonders if this is actually a good idea. Shijo imagines scenarios of tagging along for holidays and being invited to dinner. She believes that befriending the sister will eventually lead to more time with Karasuma. Shijo gets flustered as she thinks about her relationship with Karasuma inevitably becoming much closer through this plan. Fushimi notes that being close to the sibling was supposed to be her role, prompting an apology from Shijo. Tamari admits she was surprised to find two cute ladies at her home, causing Shijo and Fushimi to swoon in delight. Fushimi asks Tamari if she can pat her head for just a moment. Karasuma laughs as Shijo scolds herself for losing her composure and letting her emotions take over. Fushimi pets Tamara's head and decides that becoming her friend is only a matter of time. Shijo worries that the situation is turning against her. Tamari bluntly asks Fushimi what her relationship is with her brother, a question that leaves both of the older girls completely stunned. Fushimi explains to Tamari that she and Karasuma simply belong to the same club. Shijo is internally relieved that the question was so straightforward. Shijo decides she must take action to maintain the current dynamic. She starts to tell Tamari about her own relationship with Karasuma while sitting on the bed. Shijo stretches her leg out over Karasuma's head and labels him her manservant. Shijo pokes Karasuma's head with her foot, asserting that he works for her as her arms and legs. She challenges him to deny his role as her subordinate. Shijo silently apologizes to Karasuma, deciding she cannot afford to get close to his sister. She resolves to intentionally make the girl hate her. Tamari asks if Shijo is the reason why her brother has been arriving home late. Shijo confirms it, stating that he has been busy taking care of her. Shijo offers a fake apology for stealing Tamara's time with her brother. She waits for the expected outburst of anger or jealousy from the girl. Tamari stares at Shijo and identifies her as the witch her brother mentioned. Shijo is completely shocked by the realization. Tamari approaches Shijo and tells her that she actually gives off a cool aura. Shijo is confused as she senses no hostility or jealousy coming from the girl. Tamari asks her brother if she can do her homework in his room with them, promising to be quiet. Shijo is stunned that her plan to be hated failed so completely. Shijo and Tamari a quiet look as they sit in the room together. Tamari asks if she isn't allowed to stay while Shijo remains speechless and flustered. Tamari squeezes in and sits right next to Shijo at the table. Shijo freezes up, feeling that the girl is sitting way too close to her. The group begins studying around the table. Shijo wonders if the girl isn't wary of her at all and laments that she couldn't push Tamari toward Fushimi as planned. Tamari accidentally drops her eraser. Shijo reaches out to catch it, and their hands touch as they both grab for the object at the same time. Tamari thanks the witch lady, which leaves Shijo blushing and completely caught off guard by the polite remark. Shijo wonders if Tamari actually likes her despite her suspicious behavior. Tamari then slides over to Fushimi and asks for help understanding a specific part of the material. Fushimi gives a serious stare and agrees to help Tamari with her studies. Fushimi claims she is excellent at the subject and tells Tamari to ask her anything. Her intense aura and sudden confidence leave Shijo looking shocked. Tamari praises Fushimi for being a great teacher and says she understands everything now. Fushimi replies that Tamari is simply a fast learner and barely needed any explanation. Shijo watches them and thinks their interaction looks like a very close friendship. She grows increasingly distressed as she realizes her plan to be hated has completely failed. Shijo reflects on the unexpected results of the study session, noting how Fushimi found common ground with Tamari while also getting closer to Karasuma. Shijo happily concludes that the day was an absolute success. Fushimi and Tamari continue to study together while Karasuma looks on. Karasuma appears tired and flustered after the long and chaotic study session. Shijo and Fushimi head home together. Karasuma and Tamari wave goodbye to them from outside the house. Karasuma thanks Tamari for not revealing that they already know Shijo is a mangaka. Tamari giggles and says that the witch is actually a very interesting person. Tamari remarks that Shijo behaves exactly like a manga character, just as Karasuma described. She notes that it was cute of her to help them out. Tamari tells her brother not to let the witch get away and tells him to bring her over to their house again. As they walk away, Fushimi starts to ask Shijo a question about her behavior toward others. Fushimi asks if her master is planning on seducing every girl she meets. Shijo blushes intensely at the question while Karasuma reflects on the day elsewhere. Shijo hums a tune while walking with Fushimi, commenting on how cute Karasuma's little sister turned out to be. Fushimi stops and gives Shijo a sharp glare, demanding to know exactly what she meant by that remark. Shijo is startled by the sudden hostility and wonders why Fushimi reacted so strongly to a simple comment. Shijo realizes Fushimi might be worried she wants to steal the attention of the little sister, but she continues to think the girl is as cute as a small animal. Yuji-sensei tells Shijo that he will let her off the hook this one time. Yuji-sensei warns Shijo that he won't be able to cover for her if her grades are this bad again. Shijo cries out in distress while Fushimi stands nearby looking concerned. As they walk through the school, Shijo admits that Fushimi getting near failing marks was unexpected. Fushimi points out that Shijo was only scribbling during their study session. They both note that summer has arrived. Looking at the calendars for July and August, Shijo asks about summer plans. Fushimi explains she will mostly be busy with club work and a part-time job, though she has other interests she wants to pursue. Fushimi turns gloomy at the suggestion of going to the beach, complaining about the crowds and the sun. Shijo is surprised that Fushimi is actually such a negative character when it comes to summer activities. Fushimi admits she needs to go buy a swimsuit. Shijo realizes that she doesn't have one either. Shijo tells Fushimi that the timing is perfect and asks to go with her. Fushimi is visibly flustered by the invitation. The group agrees on the plan to go shopping together. A bonus chapter begins with Shijo, Fushimi, and Umiya Senpai arriving at the mall. Shijo excitedly declares that it is time for their shopping date. The three girls walk through the shopping center together, with Shijo and Umiya Senpai appearing very enthusiastic, while Fushimi remains quiet. Umiya Senpai worries if she is getting in the way, but Fushimi assures her that her presence helps because she would be too nervous alone with Shijo. Shijo looks at a previous text from Umiya Senpai asking for help to befriend Fushimi and realizes that the two girls are actually very similar. Shijo asks the other two if they have known each other for a long time. Umiya Senpai explains that they were both in the same music class back in middle school. Umiya Senpai mentions that Fushimi was different back then, and she was surprised by her high school debut. Shijo feels her plan to assist their love is going well, but decides she must learn more about Fushimi-kun first. Shijo reflects on how her past failures were caused by Fushimi-kun's unpredictability. She commits to a new plan to learn more about him. To better help the pair with their relationship, Shijo decides she needs to get closer to Fushimi. She resolves to find out more about Fushimi-kun. Shijo is glad she invited Umiya Senpai because it might reveal a new side of Fushimi-kun. In the background, Fushimi-kun reacts with shock to the idea of buying a swimsuit. Umiya-senpai tells the group that she is looking forward to the shopping trip. Umiya-senpai reveals she invited someone from the photography club. Shijo is confused and wonders why she was told to be ready. Shijo tries on a bikini and feels it is a bit excessive. Umiya-senpai excitedly takes photos telling her she looks cute and that she has always wanted a photo like this. Shijo tries on a one-piece swimsuit which Umiya-senpai thinks looks great. Fushimi agrees and hands over another option she thinks would look good. Shijo tells Fushimi that she needs to pick out her own swimsuit as well. Umiya-senpai starts grabbing more options, but Fushimi tells them both to hold on. Fushimi tries on several swimsuits but struggles to choose. She worries about some being too flashy or too modest, while Shijo thinks about how they need to get the boy to see her like this. The group holds a strategy meeting because Fushimi cannot make a decision. Shijo suggests buying every swimsuit they tried, but Fushimi points out they do not have enough money. Shijo realizes that she has learned something important about Fushimi from the experience. Shijo observes that despite her strong appearance, Fushimi cares deeply about the opinions of others and hides her true personality. She becomes more curious about Fushimi's hidden side. As they walk through the mall, Fushimi stops to look at a display of guitars in a shop window. Takarazuka suggests checking out a music store. Fushimi brushes it off and says she is fine. Fushimi explains she will come back another time since it would take too long. Takarazuka tells her not to hold back because she loves seeing people be honest about their passions. Takarazuka tells Fushimi to show her what she loves. Fushimi reacts with surprise. The group walks into the music store. They look at guitars and equipment. Fushimi points toward something she likes. Fushimi sits down at a keyboard and starts playing as Takarazuka watches closely. Everyone listens to the music and reacts with blushes. Fushimi carries a shopping bag and says she liked that one the most. Takarazuka tells her to always be true to herself. Fushimi feels she has become closer to Takarazuka. Takarazuka thinks about her plan to have the boy organize a day to hang out together. Takarazuka expresses surprise at meeting someone. A girl with a headband greets Takarazuka. Takarazuka comments on seeing the witch out shopping with friends. The girl explains she is there for manga club activities. The headband girl announces she is shopping for a training camp with Fushimi-kun and another member. The girl describes securing a beach resort for the training camp because the sound of the waves makes for a great environment. Takarazuka stares blankly as she hears about the trip to the beach. The girl mentions that the manga club is small, so she might bring the art club along as well. Takarazuka begs to join the group and promises to explain the situation to Yuji-kun herself. Takarazuka considers the beach trip and sleepover a perfect opportunity, attributing the stroke of luck to the boy's protagonist-like influence. A view of the ocean horizon accompanies a thought about being completely certain of what is to come. The entire group arrives at the seaside and declares that this will be the best summer they have ever had. Takarazuka realizes with a start that there are far more people present than she initially expected. A small photo of Umiya and her friends appears within a digital interface. Messages in a group chat discuss wanting to buy swimsuits despite not having firm plans to use them yet. One of the girls looks down at her phone while catching up on the group's conversation. Takarazuka suddenly announces to the boy and his companion that they are going to buy materials for the training camp right away. The girls stand on the shore and marvel at how wonderful the sea looks under the bright sun. Takarazuka asks the younger girl if this is her first time at the beach, and the girl explains that she has not had many opportunities to travel. The younger girl thanks the others for their kindness and says she really wants to enjoy the day, which moves the older girls. The boy tells Takarazuka that she was a big help and explains he could not leave his young companion home alone, while Takarazuka brushes it off as a trivial matter. Takarazuka is shocked to learn that Umiya was invited as a photographer, even though she does not belong to either of the two clubs. Takarazuka is stunned to discover that Umiya and the boy have been childhood friends this entire time, a fact Umiya admits she simply forgot to mention. The blonde girl expresses surprise at Nano-ni's wide circle of friends, while Sho-chan comments on how many people she knows. Nano-ni asks if Sho-chan is trying to imply something. Sho-chan observes how closely and intimately the two of them speak to each other. Nano-ni tells Sho-chan she really just wanted to visit the beach with him. The blonde girl watches them closely, wondering if the trip will reveal that the childhood friends are actually in love. She thinks the open atmosphere might lay their relationship bare. Nano-ni explains that the trip is a joint training camp for the manga and art clubs. The blonde girl shouts to wait a second as everyone gets ready for the water. Nano-ni announces that they will start the day with 10 hours of sketching practice. Sho-chan is confused and asks if she understands that they are at a beach. The girls argue that having fun with friends at the beach is a valuable experience for drawing manga. Nano-ni is surprised to learn that one of them even secured a resort for this purpose. Nano-ni quickly changes her mind and claims that having fun was exactly what she planned all along. The group gets excited and prepares to head out. The group starts playing in the ocean. Nano-ni holds a beach ball while the blonde girl floats nearby in a tube and Sho-chan swims with them. The club members build sandcastles and splash around in the water. Sho-chan ends up in the middle of the group as everyone enjoys the beach activities. Nano-ni sits on the sand with her camera while the blonde girl lies down completely exhausted. They realize the girl only lasted 10 minutes before burning out, which Nano-ni attributes to her being a shut-in. Nano-ni says it is a shame but decides she will just observe the others from now on. The blonde girl looks on as Nano-ni settles into her role as the spectator. Nano-ni notices Yuji-sensei relaxing in a lounge chair nearby. He says he is fine just watching the youngsters have a good time, and Nano-ni realizes she said the exact same thing. The blonde girl asks if Nano-ni is truly okay with just watching everyone else play. Nano-ni explains that being the photographer and relaxing is what makes her feel the most comfortable. Nano-ni watches Sho-chan play in the water with the other girls. She remarks that he is once again surrounded by cute girls and does not seem to notice it himself. The blonde girl gets fired up and asks Nano-ni how she feels seeing that as his childhood friend. She presses Nano-ni on whether she views Sho-chan like a little brother or something more. The blonde girl looks directly at Nano-ni and asks her if she is in love with Sho-chan. Nano-ni listens to the question while sitting under the beach umbrella with her camera. Sho mentions how often Kimichi thinks about the boy, which causes Kimichi to react with a startled shout and ask what made her say that. Kimichi insists that she only views the boy as an interesting toy while trying to hide her true feelings. Sho accepts this and points out how clearly the boy is interested in Fushimi-kun while they are in the water. Kimichi is shocked when Sho reiterates that the boy has feelings for the other girl. Sho explains that his feelings are easy to notice because they are childhood friends and notes that it is a relief that Kimichi does not feel the same way. Sho declares that she will support the boy and Fushimi-san and asks Kimichi if she is truly okay with that decision. Kimichi claims she does not mind at all before a call from the others signals that their break is over. The girls from the rival club arrive and announce that it is time for a beach volleyball match. Kimichi says she cannot play right now and offers to be the referee instead. The volleyball match begins with the boy and the dark-haired girl playing together as Kimichi watches from a distance. The boy checks on his partner during the game while Kimichi observes their interaction from the sidelines. Kimichi reflects on her decision to stay back so she can avoid having her heart race from getting too close to him. Someone calls out to Kimichi to retrieve a ball that went into the water, and she agrees to get it. Kimichi jokes about doing chores for her disciple while picking up the ball as a large wave rises behind her. The wave crashes over Kimichi and pulls her under, leaving only her hat and the ball floating on the surface as the others look back. Shiju struggles underwater after getting a cramp in her leg. She finds it difficult to breathe and realizes she cannot move properly. A hand reaches down into the water and firmly grabs her wrist. The boy pulls Shiju up to the surface and out of the water. The boy holds her close and asks if she is all right. He tells her that she is hopeless and that he cannot take his eyes off her for even a second. The group walks back through the shallow water as the other girls comment on the boy's fast reaction speed and how Shiju managed to drown in such a shallow area. Shiju remains silent and looks down with a flustered expression as water drips from her face. A plane leaves a trail in the sky above the palm trees while someone calls out for help. Sho holds up her camera and takes several photos of the group. Sho shivers with excitement and tells herself that the situation is amazing. Sho reflects on how much she enjoys seeing a girl in love. She feels glad that she went through the trouble of setting up the joint training camp and decides she should thank Takarazuka-san for the help. The boy points out that Shiju's actions are contradictory since she claimed she only wanted to be a bystander. Sho smiles wide and prepares to give a response. Sho watches the group from the distance and decides that she will be able to see even more interesting expressions from them now. The boy holds his phone to his ear and asks for clarification about a training camp. The boy tells someone over the phone that he does not want to leave his sister alone for too long and plans to talk to his parents about it. A girl starts to cry upon hearing his concerns. The girl shouts at him to just bring his sister along and mentions that she will handle the travel expenses. Shiju fidgets uncomfortably while the boy sketches her on a canvas. She admits that the situation feels a bit embarrassing. Shiju reclines in a chair as a model and remarks on the boy using someone who cannot move to practice his drawing. Sho takes a photo and tells Shiju to give up because she wore the same outfit earlier. Shiju asks Sho if she is some kind of criminal for taking the picture. The boy stares intently at Shiju while he works, which causes her heart to beat rapidly. Shiju eventually gives up internally as the boy continues to stare at her while he draws. The boy announces that it is time for a break. Shiju reflects on how she wanted to watch others fall in love but ended up being the one with a racing heart. The boy tells her that there is no need to rush things because they have only just begun. Sho calls out to Shiju and Kimichi and says she has something to show them while reaching into her bag. Sho presents a draft of her newest work. The boy and the dark-haired girl are shocked that she finished it so quickly despite their recent exams. Sho asks for their honest impressions and reminds them that she is aiming to be a professional. Shiju agrees to take a moment to read it. Sho mentions how much the mangaka girl trusts Shiju, which causes the mangaka girl to blush intensely and react with shock. The girl explains that while she does not know much about manga, she realizes Shiju is the very first person seeing these new ideas. Shiju looks away silently. Sho coughs into her hand and admits that she actually does trust Shiju as she watches her rival look through the draft. Sho declares that she trusts Shiju's aesthetic sense specifically because they are rivals. She explains that getting to the top means being willing to abandon one's pride and rely on others when necessary. The others are impressed by Sho's dedication. One boy notes that it is a great attitude for a creator to have while the black-haired girl cheers her on. The boy suddenly holds up his own stack of papers and announces that he has also completed a draft for his new work. Shiju is shocked that the boy managed to finish a draft so quickly. He explains that since they are at a training camp, he did not want to show up empty-handed. Sho is excited by the challenge and notes that the boy never disappoints as an opponent. She slams her papers down and suggests they hold a brainstorming meeting immediately. Sho laughs to herself about how the trip has turned into a shounen manga training camp while the group gathers around the table to look at the different drafts. The black-haired girl stands back and watches the others as they stay focused on their manga work. Inspired by her friend's hard work, the black-haired girl puts on her headphones and sits at her laptop to start working on her own music. Everyone in the group stays busy with their creative projects, filling the room with the sound of drawing and music making late into the day. Shiju eventually collapses face down on the table from exhaustion. The boys and the black-haired girl bring in trays of food and tell her that it is finally time for a dinner break. Later that night, Shiju lies face down on her bed in the dark room, still deep in thought. Shiju worries that if things continue this way, nothing particularly noteworthy or romantic will happen during the trip. She reflects on the boy and Fushimi-kun's relationship becoming closer, but decides she needs a major event to spark her creative inspiration for her story. Sho suddenly bursts into the room carrying a pillow and announces that there is one essential event still missing from their training camp. Sho loudly announces that it is time for a pillow fight while holding a pillow. Shiju lies in bed and decides to pretend she is sleeping because she finds the idea tiresome and cannot move anyway. Sho wonders if the other girls are even there. Sho concludes that Shiju is hopeless after noticing she seems to be asleep. The black-haired girl suggests that Shiju must be tired from moving around so much during the day. Sho laments losing a perfect opportunity for a camp event, while Shiju feels she has no choice but to keep up the act. Sho suddenly suggests holding a late-night love chat party instead. Shiju is startled by the suggestion and listens intently from the bed. Shiju realizes this is an even better event than she could have wished for because she might hear them talk about the boy. She notes the ridiculous gap between a pillow fight and this new topic while the other two girls sit together. Someone asks Sho if there is someone she likes or if she already has a fiancé. Sho insists that her mind is currently focused only on her manga. Shiju wonders what Sho is trying to achieve with this topic. The girls turn the question to Fushimi-chan, mentioning her childhood friendship with Karasuma-kun. Fushimi-chan smiles and admits that she does like him, which causes Shiju to react with shock. Fushimi-chan explains that watching him is never boring because fun things always happen when he is around. Sho comments that she can tell there is no actual romance in that sentiment. Sho asks Fushimi-chan if she feels anything deeper and points out that the boy's manga features a character that looks exactly like her. Shiju gasps upon hearing this revelation. Sho suggests that perhaps the boy is drawing just because of her making Fushimi-chan sweat and look conflicted. Sho quickly adds that she is only kidding and that such a thing couldn't be true. Fushimi-chan falls silent and looks down with a serious expression. Fushimi-chan thinks about how much Karasuma-kun has grown in such a short time. She notes that he has given his all to his challenges without hesitation ever since becoming Shiju-senpai's disciple. Fushimi-chan blushes as she honestly admits to herself that she thought he looked pretty cool. Shiju listens from the bed with wide eyes, taking in everything that was just said. Fushimi-chan explains to the group that looking at him makes her want to try her best as well. She tells herself that this is not the time to stall or hesitate. Fushimi-chan declares that she wants to give her all to the things she wants to do and does not want to let those opportunities slip away. Fushimi-kun says she wants to become able to shine just like him and hopes that someday she can reach that level. Sho is glad to hear her rival still has goals to achieve and encourages them both to work hard toward their dreams as she firmly grabs her hand. Sho's friends notice how intense the mood has become while Shiju watches them and feels certain that she was right about Fushimi-kun. Outside on the balcony, someone decides that there is only one thing left to do as the sun hangs over the distant island. Sho leans over the railing and calls out to Umiya-kun to get his attention. Shiju tells the boy that she needs his help with something and makes her next move. Yuji-sensei asks the two boys if they have any ulterior motives for acting like servants to the girls. Karasuma-kun admits that it feels more like he is just taking care of a big baby while a tiny Sho floats in his mind. Umiya-kun denies having bad motives and declares that he deeply respects Shiju as a devoted follower. Yuji-sensei is disturbed by the boys' intense devotion and wonders what they could possibly be thinking. Sho leads the group into the dark woods and announces the start of a test of courage as the final camp event. Karasuma-kun asks if this was planned as Sho explains that the rules are simple and that surprising people is just her way of doing things. Sho points to the forest path and explains they just need to follow the route to get a reward, reassuring the boy that the trail is safe and easy to follow. Yuji-sensei pets the little sister's head and says he will stay behind with her, warning the others to contact him immediately if anything happens. Shiju says she wants to get some fresh air after being inside all day and presents a box to decide the pairs for the walk. The manga club pair goes first while Shiju and Umiya follow behind. The boy apologizes for the situation, but Fushimi-san tells him that she feels more comfortable with him than with anyone else. Fushimi-san explains that being paired with Shiju-senpai would have been too much for her heart, and anyone else would be awkward. The boy agrees as she secretly tells herself that a romantic situation between them would never happen anyway. Shiju and Umiya walk through the forest. Umiya notes that Shiju's sister is also participating and thinks about Shiju's enthusiastic attitude toward making the trip interesting. The boy and Fushimi-san walk deeper into the dark woods. He suspects that Shiju and the other girl plotted together to rig the pair drawings. Shiju reflects on how well her plan is going thanks to Sho's help. She recalls how Sho rigged the draw and analyzed the route because she wanted to support the boy. Shiju tells Sho that it is certain the boy and Fushimi-san are attracted to each other and expects the test of courage to bring their feelings even closer together. Sho remains silent. Shiju decides they should watch the other pair from a special vantage point. They encounter a club member dressed as a ghost who points them toward a specific path. As they walk through the dark forest, the boy notices that his flashlight battery is starting to fail. The boy switches to his phone light and notes that the darkening forest has created a scary atmosphere. Fushimi-san suddenly trips over a branch with a loud thud. The boy checks on Fushimi-san as she recovers. They notice the path is no longer well maintained and realize they have strayed from the trail and cannot remember the way back. The two stand together in the middle of the dark forest and look around at the dense trees in silence. Fushimi-san asks if they have doomed themselves by getting lost. The boy tries to reassure her by pointing out that it is a small forest and he still has reception on his phone. The boy remembers Sho saying that something would appear on the trail just as a nearby tree branch makes a creaking sound. A branch snaps and falls, causing Fushimi-san to scream and cling to the boy in terror. He realizes it was just a falling branch and tries to calm her down. The boy calls out to Fushimi-san but finds that she has completely frozen in place due to her intense fear. Shiju suggests heading toward an open area as the scene transitions to the shoreline at night. The boy checks his phone and informs Fushimi-san that he sent their GPS location and that help is on the way. Fushimi-san thanks him and apologizes for her earlier panic, while Yuji-sensei watches from the bushes and tells himself not to let them make any foolish moves. They sit together by the water, and Fushimi-san remarks on the beautiful nighttime view. She tells the boy that he has really changed recently. Fushimi-san says he has become someone she can rely on. He attributes this growth to being pushed around so much that he stopped worrying about minor things. Fushimi-san considers how much the boy has grown through instigation, while she feels like she has been stuck in place. Fushimi-san pulls out an earbud and asks the boy to listen to something she worked hard to create so she could be proud to match him. She explains that she wrote a song after being inspired by seeing everyone give their best during the training camp. She admits that it is currently just a demo that still needs many adjustments. The boy listens to the track and praises it, saying he can feel her personality in the music and that he really loves it. The boy asks if she intends to the song online. She confirms she wants to and mentions her plan to make a music video for it once it is ready. Fushimi-san looks away and admits that it feels wrong to ask for a favor given her past behavior toward him. She continues by saying she still does not fully understand her own feelings. Fushimi-san declares that she wants him to be the one to draw the art for her work because she respects him as a fellow creator. The boy smiles warmly and says he would be more than glad to help her with anything he can do. He explains that he worked hard all this time specifically so he would be able to say those words to her. Shiju watches from behind a bush as the boy and Fushimi-san walk together along the beach under the crescent moon. Sho remarks on the wonderful romance developing between the two and asks if it seems reciprocal. Shiju agrees that their planning has clearly paid off. Shiju stares ahead silently as she continues to observe the pair. Shiju concludes that the two will be fine now because time will naturally bring them closer together even without her help. The boy works on his manga and thinks about how he will eventually have everything he needs for his story. He looks off to the side with a calm expression. Shiju suddenly breaks down in tears while her face flushes with a mix of emotions. Sho is startled by Shiju's tears and asks why she is crying. Shiju covers her face and tells herself that this was not supposed to happen. A rustle in the woods makes the boy and Fushimi-san stop and look back toward the trees. The boy is stunned to find Shiju in the bushes and wonders if she witnessed their entire conversation. The boy suspects that Shiju planned for them to get lost so she could observe them for her manga. Shiju hides her face in embarrassment as she realizes she was spotted. Shiju continues to weep and wipes at her eyes while hiding behind the leaves. The boy stares back at her with wide, bewildered eyes. The boy calls out to Shiju as the wind blows through the dark trees under the starry sky. Sho asks Shiju if she is all right while Shiju keeps her head down and cries. Sho asks if Shiju can move since they need to leave soon. Shiju wipes her face and says it is not a problem. Sho reaches up and pulls on a branch while Shiju watches her from the side. The boy watches the interaction between the two girls with a silent and thoughtful expression. Fushimi-kun lays out several sketches on a table and explains that she wants to use a manga style for her music video. The boy asks Fushimi-kun to choose the best character design from the sketches. She looks away and says she likes all of them. The boy says they can only use one design and asks her to make a final choice. Fushimi-kun finds it difficult to reject any of them as Shiju watches and laughs from nearby. Shiju spins in her chair and tells the others not to hold back while they work. She explains that seeing their passion motivates her to get serious about her own projects. The boy remarks on Shiju's self-awareness. Shiju laughs and admits she cannot make demands while she is effectively an intruder in their workspace. Back at the forest edge, Yuji-sensei tells the group he is glad they are safe. Sho and the others apologize for the trouble while the teacher takes responsibility for allowing the event. Yuji-sensei asks why Shiju and Sho were so late returning. Shiju claims she got exhausted halfway through due to a lack of exercise and had to stop for a break. Shiju teases the teacher by saying the night was a test of courage for him. He angrily asks if she knows how much he worried about her. Shiju continues to smile playfully as the teacher points a finger at her and continues his lecture. The boy looks on silently with a focused and serious gaze. Later at her desk, Shiju looks at her phone while the boy reflects on her behavior and concludes that he was not imagining things. Shiju mentions that she did not expect Fushimi-kun to start posting music online so frequently. Fushimi-kun admits she was worried people would not like her covers and apologizes. Shiju tells Fushimi-kun to have more confidence in herself because she has such a wonderful singing voice. The boy asks Shiju for her opinion on which character design would work best for the music video, but she playfully insists that all of them are great. The boy asks her to be serious, and Shiju explains that she is being serious because she can feel the love for the song in every design. The boy tells Fushimi-kun that the final choice is hers to make based on her own heart since it is her personal work. He reassures her that any design she chooses will result in a fun piece of work and asks her to show him her final decision. Shiju tells them both that she wants to see the love they put into the project. Fushimi-kun asks Shiju to listen to her newest song, and Shiju agrees with great excitement. Shiju identifies the music style and explains that she has become very knowledgeable about music because she listens to it constantly while she draws. Shiju describes the character in the song as a beautiful genius scientist who becomes scatterbrained after falling in love as Fushimi-kun looks on awkwardly. Shiju realizes that she was the model for the song's character, and Fushimi-kun flusteredly confirms that it is true. Fushimi-kun admits that Shiju's real-life habits inspired the character. Shiju laughs and says she does not mind because the boy used her as a model for his manga as well. Shiju and the boy a silent, meaningful look with each other. The boy offers to give Shiju some artistic advice for her work. He suggests that Shiju should be bolder with the character's silhouette to better match the pop energy of the song. Fushimi-kun and the boy watch intently from behind as Shiju concentrates on her digital illustration. Shiju sits in a chair hugging a stuffed animal while the boy prepares food in the kitchen. Fushimi-kun stands nearby and looks at her work. The boy looks down at his illustrations with a tired expression while Shiju takes a break and drinks from a mug behind him. The boy clutches his head in frustration and admits that the work he is doing is not good enough. The boy worries about finishing the music video on time and reflects on how he has neglected Shiju lately. He remembers her telling him that his most important job is to show his love through his art. The boy and Shiju remain in a silent and emotionally charged state while they work. A hand works carefully with a stylus on a digital tablet to complete the remaining illustrations for the video. Shiju sits curled up on a sofa in a messy room and calls out to her master while surrounded by empty containers and books. The summer break ends, and the scene shifts to the school building as students gather in the hallways for the start of the new semester. Fushimi-kun tells the boy with great sincerity that the final video was exceptionally good. Fushimi-kun praises the realistic expressions in the video, and the boy admits that her feedback makes all his effort worthwhile. He mentions that the public reception has been average so far. Fushimi-kun is pleased that her original song is getting views and good comments. She notes that continuing to create work consistently will be the key to their success. The boy apologizes for taking all summer to finish the project as they walk up the stairs at school. Fushimi-kun tells him it was worth it to reach a level of quality they both find satisfying. The boy admits that learning to edit video and handle the complex illustrations was overwhelming at times. He says that he ultimately learned a lot and is happy with the great piece of work they made together. The boy declares that he is proud enough of the work to look his master in the eye again. The boy mentions that Shiju praised the video over text, but wonders how she will react in person. He looks at a screenshot of her message saying the video made her feel even more immersed in the song. Fushimi mentions she is a bit scared of getting negative feedback, while Karasuma admits he is getting nervous as they stand outside the door. Karasuma and Fushimi open the door and enter the cluttered art room. Karasuma is surprised that Shiju is not there. Fushimi notices a note left on the desk and remarks on how rare it is for her to be absent. Karasuma stands in the empty room with a worried expression, feeling a sense of discomfort. The next day, Shiju still has not come to school, leaving the hallway looking empty. Fushimi tells Karasuma that she feels like they have not been able to talk lately, and he agrees. Fushimi notes that Shiju always leaves quickly whenever they meet and assumes she must be busy with work. Karasuma admits that he has not been able to take care of her recently. Fushimi wonders if Shiju's manga is getting an anime adaptation, and Karasuma expresses his hope that it is true. Fushimi says it feels lonely without Shiju while she and Karasuma sit together in the dimly lit room. The scene shifts to Shiju's apartment, which is filled with trash bags and piles of paper. Shiju reacts with shock over the phone when she realizes how long she has actually been away from school. Shiju tells the person on the phone that she will go to school tomorrow and insists she can cook for herself as she reaches into a grocery bag. Shiju is surprised to find her bag empty and realizes she must have eaten all the food yesterday. She notes how different things are without the boy around to help. Shiju sits at her desk and questions why she is fleeing from the best creative material she has ever had. Shiju looks on with a serious expression and decides that she must keep her distance from the pair, telling herself it is not just out of fear. Shiju reflects on how she became too involved in the romance between the boy and Fushimi-kun. She decides that once they start dating, the boy will naturally stop being so attached to her. Shiju feels sad about no longer eating the meals the boy makes for her, but accepts this as the necessary step for her to continue her life as a mangaka. Shiju looks down with a somber expression and admits that her current role is far from pleasant. Shiju watches the pair from her desk and thinks of herself as a heroine who is fully aware of the reality of her situation. Shiju grips her stylus and continues to draw her manga despite her heavy heart. Shiju begins to cry silently as she works with tears streaming down her face. Shiju slumps over her desk in her messy room and sobs, admitting that she did not know being an observer would feel so painful. Karasuma suddenly bursts into the room and scolds Shiju for sleeping at her desk again, worrying about her back. Shiju wonders if she is dreaming as she watches the boy put on an apron. She asks him what he is doing in her home as he offers to cook for her. Karasuma enters the kitchen and explains that he got the key from Yuji-sensei after learning about her condition. The boy looks back at Shiju and tells her that it is his duty to take care of his master so she does not collapse. Shiju calls him a sinful man for coming into her house despite his feelings for Fushimi-kun. The boy looks directly at Shiju and tells her that he could never leave her alone. Shiju stares at him with wide, shocked eyes after hearing his confession. Karasuma declares that Shiju is just as important to him as Fushimi-kun, while Shiju internally tells him to stop before she gets hurt further. Karasuma reminds Shiju that she helped him in the past, and says he wants to repay the favor by fulfilling her expectations as his master. He explains that his dedication is not just for Fushimi-kun but also for her. The boy looks at Shiju with a serious expression. Shiju stares at him with a shocked expression as she processes his words. Shiju considers the idea of having the boy stay by her side forever. Shiju stops herself from speaking her feelings aloud while eating. She thinks about whether his current actions are for the best. Shiju sits across from the boy while they eat dinner and internally begs him to let her continue being a mangaka. Sho tells Shiju that the other two are not coming to the room today, and Shiju acknowledges the situation. Sho asks Shiju what she wanted to talk about. Sho asks Shiju if she wants to find a method to suppress her feelings of love. Sho suggests creating distance to handle her feelings, but Shiju admits she wants to stay close to collect material for her work. Sho asks why Shiju does not tell him how she feels, but Shiju insists that she cannot do that. Sho asks why Shiju supports the other pair if she loves Sho-chan so much. Shiju shouts in response. Shiju admits her love for Sho-chan but reiterates her desire to support his relationship with Fushimi-kun. Shiju explains that protecting their mutual love has become more important to her than her own feelings. Shiju's eye widens as she reaches a moment of realization. Fushimi and the boy stand behind the sofa and look at Shiju. Shiju turns around with a startled expression as she notices them standing there. Shiju reacts with shock to their presence. Fushimi apologizes and explains that they did not intend to eavesdrop on her conversation with Sho, but simply wanted to surprise her. Fushimi tells Shiju that she has completely misunderstood the situation. Shiju remains stunned and confused by the statement. Fushimi says that while the boy's encouragement was the catalyst for the song, her true feelings lie elsewhere. Shiju reacts with wide-eyed realization and shock. The group stands together in the room while Fushimi prepares to finish her explanation. Fushimi reveals that the song and all the love she put into it are actually a love letter directed at Shishiju Renji-sensei. Fushimi looks directly at Shiju and tells her that she loves her. Shiju is frozen in absolute shock as the boy watches the scene unfold. Shiju stares back at Fushimi with a look of total disbelief. Fushimi repeats her declaration and tells her senpai once again that she loves her. Shiju asks why Fushimi would love her and demands to know when she found out her true identity. Fushimi explains that she knew from the very beginning and wanted to get closer to her for that reason. Shiju laughs nervously and asks if she means she loves her as an artist. Fushimi immediately tells her that she is wrong. Fushimi clarifies that her feelings are romantic in nature, just like the feelings Shiju has for the boy. Shiju reacts with a gasp of pure shock. Fushimi explains that she initially admired Shiju as an idol and a respected mangaka who felt like a character that jumped out of the second dimension. She says she felt happy just by looking at her. Fushimi tells Shiju that while others might call her a witch, she saw her passion for her work and her feminine side. She says her love grew larger every time she learned something new about her. Shiju looks horrified as she starts to connect the dots. She asks Fushimi if she really means what she thinks she is saying. Shiju asks if Fushimi meant she only had her in mind when she told the boy she only likes people who can draw well. Fushimi confirms that she had nobody but Shiju in her heart. Shiju turns to the boy and asks if he knew about this, and he admits that he had suspected it. Shiju is devastated to realize that the romantic scenario she had planned was wrong from the start. Fushimi thanks Shiju for listening to her confession and says she is satisfied just by sharing her feelings without needing an answer. Fushimi announces she will stop coming to the art room so Shiju can prioritize her own love life. Shiju is shocked and asks why she would do such a thing. Fushimi walks away while telling Shiju that the boy will take good care of her. Shiju tries to stop her, but the boy suddenly shouts and asks her why she is acting this way. The boy asks Shiju why she was crying on the night of the test of courage. Shiju looks back at him with a startled and confused expression. Shiju avoids the subject and tells the boy that he should be thinking about Fushimi-san instead of worrying about her. The boy declares that he would never abandon Shiju and is willing to grant any wish she has. Shiju looks at Fushimi-san crying and asks the boy if he honestly thinks they could ever be happy if he makes her look like that. The boy looks on silently as he considers Shiju's words. Fushimi stops to wipe her tears and asks for an explanation from Shiju. Shiju says she was certain she saw love between the two of them while observing and asks if she was completely mistaken about their feelings. Fushimi and the boy face each other in a heavy silence. Fushimi admits she felt lost at first because she liked the boy's kindness but felt it was wrong for her to be in the clubroom after turning him down. Fushimi explains that while she felt stuck, she watched the boy grow into a creator she truly respects. Fushimi confesses that she also developed romantic feelings for the boy and expresses her desire to stand proudly beside both him and Shiju senpai. Fushimi reflects on how much she valued their time together and admits she wanted those happy moments to last forever. Fushimi starts to cry and declares that she cannot let things continue as they are if it causes Shiju senpai to suffer. The boy and Shiju look at Fushimi with stunned and deeply troubled expressions. Shiju looks away in shame and blames herself for falling in love with the boy, viewing her current distress as a punishment for her actions. Shiju regrets turning her back on her friends while sitting at her cluttered desk. Shiju realizes she was only seeing the romantic delusions she wanted to see. The boy and Fushimi stand together in silence as Shiju regrets meddling in their relationship. Shiju closes her eyes and feels guilty for trying to run away from the problem. Sho points a finger and suggests that the three of them should simply date each other to solve the conflict. Shiju, Fushimi, and the boy are all completely shocked by Sho's blunt proposal. Shiju asks Sho what she is even saying as the group remains in a state of disbelief. Sho uses her fingers to explain that since they all care for each other, any traditional pairing would inevitably leave one person unhappy. Sho smiles and explains that dating as a trio would allow everyone's mutual feelings to be realized and make everyone happy. Shiju asks if such a thing actually happens in real life, but Sho insists it is not that rare anymore. Shiju wonders if her friend is getting her ideas from manga. Fushimi gets excited and asks if the three of them should all try dating each other, which leaves Shiju and the boy in total shock. Shiju shouts out Fushimi's name in disbelief, while the boy looks on with a startled expression. Fushimi points out that dating as a trio would give Shiju the best possible vantage point to observe them for her work. Shiju admits that she has a point despite her extreme nervousness. The boy agrees that the plan makes sense since it would allow him to treasure both his master and Fushimi-kun. Shiju is horrified that even he is considering the idea. Shiju panics and tells them both to wait, insisting that there is no way she can agree to this. The boy tells Shiju that her current behavior is unlike her. Shiju struggles with her internal reason for avoiding romance, fearing that her own love will make her creative work grow dull. The boy smiles and suggests that such a situation would be interesting and just like a manga story. Shiju stares at him with wide, shocked eyes as his suggestion sinks in. Shiju realizes that while these are romantic feelings, if it truly is love, she would want it to be shown to her directly. The boy and Fushimi stand together and ask Shiju one more time if she will try dating them both. Shiju is completely overwhelmed by the proposal and her head begins to spin with confusion. Shiju covers her face in embarrassment while the group agrees to do their best together as the scene fades to the school building. Sho trembles with excitement and laughs to herself while watching the complicated situation unfold.